Let's start this video. It's a beautiful day in Mount Olympus, and one goddess had already had a plan for today. Hestia, goddess of family, fire and the hearth, was sitting on a log near the main hearth and poking the flickering flame with a wooden stick in her hand. Sitting with her were other goddesses known as Athena, Artemis, Hera, Demeter, Hecate, Amphitrite, Persephone and Aphrodite. On one side was Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle, daughter of Zeus and one of the three virgin goddesses. She had snow-white hair flowing down her back gracefully like a waterfall with two small long braids at either side of her face, and beautiful sapphire blue eyes glowing with power and knowledge. She was wearing a simple white dress with some parts covered in silver armor with blue decoration. All in all, she looked beautiful and powerful at the same time. Sitting next to her was Artemis, goddess of the moon, hunt and childbirth. She had brown hair done in a high ponytail, and glowing hazel eyes looked strangely like the moon. She wore a simple knee-length tunic in brown for easier movements. Strapped to her back was a quiver filled with sharp arrows, and at her side was a hunting bow. She was happily munching as many cookies as possible with a satisfied expression on her face. Sitting opposite of the two was Demeter, goddess of harvest, daughter of Re and Cronus. She had brown hair which was tied in a bun and matching eyes. She wore a simple and civilian green suit with no decorating on it. Next to her was Persephone, goddess of spring, queen of the underworld, wife of Hades, daughter of Zeus and Demeter. She is a young beautiful woman with shoulder-length indigo hair and black eyes. She wore a black short dress covering her splendid body, but also showing off her milky white skin and perfect curves. The mother and daughter couple were having their moment together, talking and sharing stories. After all, Demeter is an Olympian, there isn't that much free time for her, while Persephone was tricked by Hades to remain in the underworld. On their left side was Hera, goddess of marriage, motherhood and women, wife of Zeus, youngest daughter of Re and Cronus. She is a beautiful woman with long silky blonde hair flowing gracefully down her back, covering her forehead and framing her face in the most beautiful way, and blood-red eyes, which made her beauty more exotic and otherworldly. She wore a short white silk skirt that only reached her mid-thigh, which had a slit on one side, revealing her long wonderful legs, and a white sleeveless Chinese shirt, showing off her milky white skin and stomach. The shirt had a large diamond hole where her above-average breasts are, which were covered by leather breastplate, but still reveal a generous amount of her wonderful cleavage. She also wore long white fingerless silk gloves with lavender decorating and a tiara with a big beautiful ruby gem in the middle and two white wings at either side of the gem. All in all, she was the very representation of beauty and elegance. She was rather calm and quiet, munching Hestia's handmade cookies at a slow pace while listening to Amphitrite's story about her husband. Amphitrite is a beautiful woman with long light blue hair and brown eyes, wearing a blue dress, which looked a lot like a sailor uniform. She was the goddess of sea and fish, queen of the ocean and wife of Poseidon. She had a frown on her face while talking about her husband with Hera, who was just listening with little to no interest. Recently, Amphitrite had found out that her husband had cheated on her again, and she wasn't happy at all. Sitting opposite of them was Hestia. The goddess of the hearth had midnight black hair that reached her mid-back and curly at the end with amber eyes which looked like orbs containing orange flames flickering here and now depended on her emotions. She wore a simple black nightgown that fitted perfectly on her beautiful figure. As always, she was poking the flame with her wooden stick, creating cracking noises in the air with a small smile on her face. Sitting next to her was Hecate. Goddess and Titaness of magic, ghost, mystery and darkness, took the form of a pale young girl. She had short straight blue hair that came down to her neck with a fringe that covered her forehead. She wore most of the hair on the side of her head behind her ears, with some kept at the front and two long strands of hair on either side of her head that came down past her shoulders. She also had electric blue eyes. Hecate wore a white large cape over her white blouse and a big hat with a hat looking strangely like a triangle pillow. Leaning on her side was her magical staff in the form of a golden staff with 6 triangular rings dangling on a bigger triangular ring. She was quietly munching her cookies while staring at the campfire with her perfect poker face. Sitting on Hestia's left was her best friend, Aphrodite, who looked a bit lifeless today. She was the goddess of beauty, love and lust, daughter to the primordial of the sky Uranus, wife of Hephaestus and Ares' official lover. A young woman with blazing red hair that reached her lower back with 2 autumn leaves on either side of her head and ruby red eyes. She was the most beautiful goddess in existence, with only Hera and Mother Ray could rival. She had milky white skin and a splendid figure which was gracefully covered in her pink long-sleeved shirt and pink short skirt with black stockings. Overall, she looked like a normal schoolgirl, with the only difference was her otherworldly beauty and natural charm. It's her usual appearance, but today, something was different. Aphrodite looked lifeless and heartbroken. She hadn't touched her cookies since the beginning of their usual meeting. "Why are you so sad, Aphrodite?" Hestia's warm voice and the unusual question draw everyone's attention to the goddess of beauty. The question seemed to break her out of her downcast thought as Aphrodite flinched. She hugged her knees closer to her chest, her body shaking, and some sniffing noises could be heard. She was crying. She answered shakily, and Hestia easily picked it up as a lie. She hugged her best friend and ran a hand up and down her back comfortingly. "I'd let it all out. We are here with you." Hestia whispered soothingly in her ear, and it only made the goddess of beauty cry harder. Everyone grew silent at the sudden change of event. Aphrodite wasn't someone who would cry her heart out when something happened. She always had a happy-go-lucky attitude and an immunity to insults. To see her this way was quite weird to say the least. Despite what people said, Hestia saw Aphrodite as her best friend, and she would do anything to get her out of this state. Hestia. Aphrodite's quiet whisper could be heard clearly as all the activities at the main hearth had come to a stop. "Am I just a plaything?" Hestia's eyes widened a bit at her broken voice and the question. To do this much damage on the goddess of love, who usually just shrugged off insults thrown her way here and there, she could only think of one person. The one closest to her at this moment. "Ares?" Hestia whispered angrily as her warm and cozy eyes of fire changed to dangerous flickering flames. The others seemed to get ideas and had various reactions depending on their relationships with Aphrodite. Athena seemed calm, but the goddess of wisdom had her eyes closed and her hand clenched tightly. Hestia could understand since Athena, like her, is Aphrodite's best friend. Despite their constant bickering about whatever their topics were, the two cared for each other deeply. Artemis was sharpening her arrow with a dark look on her face. The goddess of hunting was probably thinking up a way to castrate Ares with as much pain as possible. Artemis didn't like Aphrodite, but she didn't hate her either. She just held a grudge against men, especially one like Ares. Hera just sighed since she didn't know what to do about the situation. Ares was her son, but she didn't hold any love for that warmonger, since he was so much like Zeus. Amphitrite gave Aphrodite a few comforting words just like Hestia, since her problem was somewhat like her and Poseidon. Demeter and Persephone had stopped their conversation and were looking at Aphrodite with a mixture of worry and pity. Hecate had several blue fire wisps surrounding her frame, her eyes were closed, and not a hint of emotions on her face. "Ares, he doesn't love me. For millennia, sniff, he has been using me. Sniff, for him, I'm just a plaything, no more than a bitch, a slut for him to vent his frustration and need. Sniff, I'm no more than a plaything, sniff. He doesn't love me. He is just using me. He doesn't care for me. He's just like these people, sniff, no one will ever love me or need me." Sniff, Aphrodite finished as she clutched Hestia's chest tighter and cried louder, letting all her suppressed feelings out. Hestia let some tears roll down her cheeks as she continued to comfort her best friend. She couldn't do anything for now, but one day, Ares would hope he had never existed in the first place. She knew too well Aphrodite's pain. She was the goddess of beauty, love and lust. People said her beauty is a blessing, but Aphrodite thought it was more of a curse. Because of her beauty, men from mortal to immortal fell for her, but not because of love. They lusted after her beauty and because of it, she had never found her true love, her other half, her destined one. Her beauty was unrivaled, gods and titans fought for her attention left and right, which was the reason she was married to Hephaestus by Zeus, to cease the upcoming war back then. She had had sex with many men in the past, but she always remembered them. She remembered their names, she remembered her moment with them, and she remembered their love for her, even if it lasted only for a moment, even if it wasn't real. For as long as she existed, she had been finding her true love, and many failed relationships had resulted in her blind love with Ares. The god of war had come to her when she was emotionally weak and when he lusted after her beauty the most. Many relationships began with genuine love, but time could alter all of them. If even genuine love couldn't hold a candle against time, how would lust do? Even one with unrivaled beauty like Aphrodite and Hera couldn't maintain their relationships with their respective partner with their beauty alone. Aphrodite and Ares might have thousands upon thousands passionate nights together, but then again, when one achieved what they wanted the most, it lost its value to them. Ares was no exception. His lust for Aphrodite was strong at first, but when he had finally laid his hand on her, he grew bored as time passed by. Aphrodite had the power to sense love, but it could only work on mortal and demigod, so for millennia, she had been used by Ares and got ditched by the very same man afterwards. Hestia seriously pitied her best friend. Aphrodite would be a very good wife if she was married to the one she loved and loved her genuinely. But like some twisted fate, the goddess of love had never been loved genuinely. To be the goddess of love but never experience true and genuine love. Betrayed by the one she loved the most for millennia. Hestia honestly hoped nothing bad will happen to Aphrodite next. If not, the goddess of love might lose her final hope and fade away to avoid being in pain again. Silence reigned the main hearth for the next hours. Every goddess present there could only hope for the best for Aphrodite and gave her their blessing. Poor Aphrodite put her faith and love on that warmonger bastard, only to be betrayed by him. I hope she will learn a lesson to not love any man after this. Artemis said as she rubbed her temper. After several hours of constant crying, the goddess of beauty had fallen asleep on Hestia's shoulder, a peaceful expression on her face. Athena sighed at her half-sister's comment, not every woman had a grudge for men like her. Even Athena had some kind of love for man, and it's shown on her brainchild she created through magic with the man she loved. You had never been in love before, Artemis. You don't know the wonderful feeling that family brings to you. I doubt you would ever know if you remained the way you are. Hera said with a sad expression on her face. Finding true love also was her problem, but first, she needed to do something to her marriage with Zeus. That bastard of a husband wouldn't just divorce her that easily. Maybe now, she can find her true love somewhere in this world. Athena said softly with a smile on her face, but then she sighed and continued with a sad expression. And again, Olympus doesn't have a single faithful male god, and mortals included demigods can only live a short time. Athena finished with a tired sigh. She will find it eventually. Hecate's soft voice cut through the air like hot butter. The goddess Antithenes had a beautiful smile on her face as she said that. Her eyes were on her the moment she spoke her first words. What do you mean, Hecate? Demeter asked with a confused expression on her face. The Queen of Darkness just smiled at her before standing up and walking away. More and more blue wisps appeared and swirled around her frame with increasing speed. Hecate looked around one last time with a smiling face before she totally disappeared. Her words still linger in the air as the wisp started to dissipate itself. It's a mystery. It might just be a second, but Hera could swear that Hecate had given her a soft beautiful smile and a look full of joy and hope before she teleported away. I wonder what meaning is that? Duchan eagerly high-pitched voice followed by footsteps echoed through the hallway and reached the room of one person. The door swung open to reveal a small girl with brown hair flowing down her back with two pigtails on top of her head, one on each side. The girl ran to bed with her small foot and jumped onto it. A stirring noise could be heard as the lump on the bed shifted around for a more comfortable position. Duchan, wake up. Duchan. The small girl called out as she shook the lump covered in sheet with her tiny hands. The stirring noises got louder with every shake before a strong arm shot up and wrapped around the small girl tightly. Within seconds, the girl had been pinned down and tickled by a blonde man. Pat you, Beatrice. A tall blonde man said excitedly as he tickled his daughter, eliciting a laughing storm from the squirming girl who was trying to break free from her father's grip. The father and daughter couple laughed together as they played with each other some more. It's still early in the morning, and the Uzumaki household had already made so much noise. Duchan. Stop it. The small girl named Beatrice pleaded with her father as she tried to catch her breath between her laughter. It would be a few minutes before the two decided to end their morning fun together and sat on the bed with a smile on their face. Sitting on the bed was a tall man with spiky blonde hair, two jaw-length hair's bangs framing his face, and cerulean blue eyes that held warmth and kindness in them. He wore white top with a red swirl in the center and black short pants for more comfortable sleep. What is different about him is his whiskers marks which made him look fox-like. Sitting next to him with her legs dangling excitedly was a small girl about 4-5 years old, with brown hair flowing down her back, two pigtails on top of her head, one for each side, and matching brown big innocent eyes. She was wearing a simple white dress with a red swirl in the center just like her father. Letting out a sigh, the blonde man scratched the back of his neck as he looked at his most precious people in the world. Why would you wake me up so early in the morning, Beatrice? He asked with a questioning look on his face. Hearing the question, the girl's eyes sparkled with childish excitement as she hopped on the bed again and swinging her small arms around as she answered. Duchan promised to go to the zoo with Beatrice today. He chuckled at the cute answer and gave Beatrice a kiss to her cute little nose before ruffling her hair, making the girl close her eyes in bliss. Then, let's get ready, we will go right after breakfast. Today, I, Uzumaki Naruto, shall escort you to the zoo of this humble city, princess. The blonde now identified as Naruto said dramatically as he bowed at his daughter, who just smiled widely before giving her father a hug and ran out of the room. Hi. Duchan. Naruto smiled to himself and walked out of the room to do his morning routine before making breakfast for the two of them. Today would be fun, like always. Mount Olympus Aphrodite Temple. It had been a week since her emotional chapter at the main hearth, and Aphrodite was feeling better and better thanks to her fellow goddesses. She had been constantly visited by Athena, Hestia, sometimes Artemis and surprisingly, Hera. Athena and Hestia because of their worry, Artemis came to ask if she wanted to get revenge on Ares, which she kindly refused much to the huntress's disappointment. Hera just came to make sure she didn't abandon her duty. Ares had also come. Aphrodite Temple 2 days after the meeting. It was 2 days after the meeting and Aphrodite was sitting on her throne, thinking about her immortal life from the day she rose from a pile of foams which was Uranus's castrated genitalia to this day. Aphrodite sighed, thinking about the past only helped to sadden her even more. Her eyes narrowed when she sensed a familiar presence flashed into her temple. "Come with me, Dite, to my temple," a male voice said. Aphrodite turned her gaze to the door of her temple and saw him. He is Ares, god of war. Combed back red hair and flame-like eyes, he wore a red full mail with flame decorating here and there and a fangs necklace at his neck. Confidently and arrogantly, he walked to the throne where Aphrodite was sitting and caught her hand only to be blown back by a blast of power. "Stay away from me," Aphrodite shouted, an angry expression on her face as she glared deathly at the red-hair god who was slammed into a pillar, causing debris and dust to fly everywhere. Standing up from her throne, Aphrodite walked towards the god of war, her hair shadowing her eyes, her teeth gritted together. A pink aura covering her frame and the wind swirled around her like a tornado. The whole Olympus shook as Aphrodite flared her celestial power. "You bitch, I come here to bring you back to my temple," Ares said slowly as he stood up, clearly not affected by the impact. "What do you think you are to decline my offer, huh, slut?" Ares said angrily. Aphrodite held her head down, tears slowly leaked out of her eyes and fell to the ground. Ares smirked and flared his own power. "Good, now go. Leave." It was no louder than a whisper, but Ares heard it clearly as he narrowed his eyes at Aphrodite, who was clenching her fist tightly, her red eyes shadowed by her hair and her lip a thin line, despite her falling tears. "You will come," Ares said again with his power flaring full force, thinking the goddess of love would submit to him only to be silenced as a huge blast of pure raw power hit him. It was bigger, heavier and more powerful than the blast he received a few minutes ago. It could rival the power of the big three in raw power alone. A sweat appeared on his forehead and rolled down his face as he stared at Aphrodite, who was no doubt the source of this power. The goddess of love was staring at his eyes with her ruby red eyes with no emotion in them. It made his blood run cold. "Leave," Aphrodite said more forcefully as she narrowed her red eyes at Ares, who gulped and stepped back. Those eyes were the eyes of a warrior, no of a killer, a murderer. Seeing the usually laid-back goddess like this had reminded him of one thing. The one thing he had forgotten long ago. The one thing only a few remembered. Aphrodite is Uranus's direct descendant, in her veins flowed the blood of the primordial of the sky. Ares knew with this kind of power, Aphrodite could easily beat him or even kill him with little to no effort. Gods couldn't die, but there would be a long time before he reformed completely. Gritting his teeth, Ares decided to retreat for now. He would return one day and make him his bitch again, like she had once been. "I'll remember this." With that, the god of war flushed away. Aphrodite temple present. Dite, lost in thought again. A familiar voice said in her ear, startling the goddess of love. Aya. Too deep in her thought that Aphrodite had never noticed Hestia standing beside her the whole time. Seeing the black hair goddess, Aphrodite took a deep breath to calm her nerves, before glaring at the goddess mockingly with a pout on her face. "Moo. Don't do that again," Aphrodite said, receiving a chuckle from Hestia. Sitting down next to her best friend, the goddess of the hearth looked straight into her eyes with a worried face. "Are you okay, Dite?" Aphrodite grew a small smile at that, her friend always cared for her. "I'm fine. Don't worry," Aphrodite answered truthfully. She wanted to find love, true and genuine love, find her destined one and then, live the rest of her immortal life with him. Ares' arrival the other day had only strengthened her determination to do just that. She held no love for him now. But it still hurts her a little. Hestia smiled softly at her best friend, that's the Aphrodite she knows. Decada said you would find it eventually. Your true love. Hestia stated and calmly waited for her friend's reaction. Aphrodite was now facing her with mouth agape and eyes widened with a mixture of sadness, fear, but most of all, hope and joy. Sad because of many failed relationships which she believed was true love she had had before. Scared because she was afraid of being betrayed again. Hope because Hecate's words had never been wrong before and joy because her wish, her purpose of living would become true. Really? Aphrodite asked hopefully and Hestia nodded before she was engulfed in a big hug by the goddess of love which she wholeheartedly returned. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Aphrodite mumbled repeatedly as she buried her face in Hestia's chest. For the goddess of family, fire and the hearth, she was beyond happy since she could help her friend. By repeating Hecate's words to Aphrodite, she had given the goddess of beauty, love and lust some hope and the reason to continue her existence. She closed her eyes and thought about the future, where she hoped her friend would be happy, her sisters and brothers would be happy, and everyone would be happy. New York. The Uzumaki household was having a good trip to the zoo. There weren't many people today due to their work and business, and for that, Naruto was thankful. The blonde man was walking through various cages with different animals inside. Beatrice on his shoulder, looking left and right with sparkles in her eyes. Naruto chuckled, this day couldn't get any better. It's noon and the two of them had already visited half of the zoo. Beatrice was extremely happy at seeing various animals and plants. The little girl had wanted to bring a baby tiger home and named him Tori-chan, which made him sweat. "Du-chan, look, it's Panda-san," Beatrice shouted excitedly as she pointed to a bamboo-filled area with several pandas inside. They were visibly unconcerned about human presence and just continued to do whatever they were doing. The small girl had taken a liking to pandas when she finished watching Kung Fu Panda. As always, Beatrice wanted to bring home a baby panda, and as always, her attempt failed. They spent about 10 minutes looking and feeding the animal before a large grumble effectively ruined the mood the family was in. Looking up at the small girl, the father and daughter couple grinned sheepishly at each other while scratching the back of their necks. "Ma, it's time for lunch." Mount Olympus Aphrodite Temple. "What are you going to do, Dite?" Hestia asked while playing a card game with her best friend, Aphrodite. The goddess of love's face fell a little at that question. Even if the words were spoken by Hecate, the queen of darkness and goddess of magic, ghost and mystery, she was still scared. Like Athena had said, Olympus doesn't have a single faithful man. That left mortals and demigods. But those two can only live a short time. For mortals, a century might be long, but for a goddess like her, it's like a second. Seeing the one you love die before your eyes because of old age while you continue to live is painful. Don't know," Aphrodite answered depressingly. She believed in Hecate and Hestia, but she had good reasons for being so worried and scared. Past experience and many more. The goddess of love sighed when she realized that she had lost the game. Hestia smiled softly at her best friend. The game was interesting, but it seems that Aphrodite couldn't focus and had lost it. The goddess of hearth stood up from her seat and looked at her best friend, her smile still on her pretty face. "Why don't you go to Earth, Dite?" Hestia suggested, and Aphrodite seemed to ponder on the option a bit before she nodded. She loves the Earth, so maybe a trip down there will help her a little. Unbeknown to the two goddesses, this trip will change their future, especially Aphrodite. Entering the cafeteria nearest to them, Naruto waved at the waitress making her blush and called their orders. The father and daughter were happily conversing with each other about the interesting trip, with Beatrice happily dangling her legs and Naruto listening to his little girl with a content smile on his face. The two Uzumaki needn't wait long for their lunch to arrive. Beatrice had ordered a strawberry cake and a cup of milk for her. Apparently, the girl had a love for sweets, and her daddy had never failed in spoiling her. His daughter is just the sweetest and cutest thing in the world that Naruto can't resist. Seriously, how did she manage to learn that godforsaken technique with the name puppy eyes? He would never know. Naruto's lunch was pretty simple. 2 big hamburgers and a cup of cola would replenish his energy and last for dinner for him. Looking at his daughter, Naruto couldn't help but smile softly at her. "How is your day, Beatrice?" Really fun, Tu-chan. Though, it would be better if you agreed to bring home Tora-chan or Po-chan," Beatrice finished with a cute pout on her face while Naruto laughed awkwardly. She wouldn't let it go by what he sighed, but smiled again when Beatrice continued to eat her strawberry cake. No matter what, seeing his daughter safe and sound always makes him feel like the happiest man in the world. As the little girl grew up, Naruto couldn't help but think about his deceased wife Krovia. Beatrice is so much like her mother that he almost had a heart attack, almost. Naruto let out a content sigh as he looked out the window, taking in the green scenery surrounding them. "She will grow up to become a beautiful lady like you, Krovia," he thought to himself as a lone tear escaped his eye and rolled down his cheek. New York a few minutes earlier. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, love and lust, was here, in New York. After pondering on what to do in human realms, the beautiful goddess decided to have a bit of sweets at her favorite cafeteria somewhere near the zoo. She had tasted all the sweets this world had to offer, and so far, this cafeteria served the best. Aphrodite let a smile graced her face as she entered the cafeteria, ready to eat her favorite chocolate cake, when suddenly she froze. She had just sensed something. Something related to her domain love. Quickly looking around, enhancing her sensing ability, Aphrodite tried to pinpoint the source of this feeling, this power. For the goddess of beauty, love and lust, this source really is a goldmine. Love is her domain, her power and her existence. Without love, she couldn't exist. Without love, she would fade away. Time seemed to stop when she laid her eyes on a blonde man who was looking out the window, taking in the scenery, and a little girl with brown hair. It happened just in a single second. All the emotions, all the love the man was radiating was so strong and powerful, so pure and so pretty. She blushed a little. So much love. For eons of existence, not once did Aphrodite meet such strong love radiated from a man, and immortal at that. As the goddess of love, she can feel and read love power in the area around her like. How long will it last? How much love do they have? False or real? But it only works on mortals, demigods and lesser beings. Gods can't be affected by this power, which is why she couldn't read Ares' feelings about her and blindly love him in the first place. The cough woke Aphrodite out of her thoughts as a waitress asked if she was okay. Realizing she had been standing there the whole time, looking at a certain blonde, the goddess of love in mortal form walked to a table and called her order. Secretly, Aphrodite glanced at the table which was occupied by the blonde and the little brunette who she guessed to be his daughter, due to their difference in ages. She nodded, a little proud of herself for the right guess when she heard the girl called him Tu-chan, which is daddy in Japanese. How would she know? Simple, gods know all the languages in the world, and with an otaku like Apollo around, it's an understatement that she knows about Japanese culture. Taking a spoonful of chocolate cream that had just been delivered to her. The goddess of love sighed, a little depressed at the fact that was lying in front of her. Such a strong love radiated from a mortal man, and its receiver was no doubt a mortal woman. She truly felt jealous with the woman for receiving such strong love. It's so beautiful, so potent, so real, and from what she felt, it will last for eternity. Aphrodite sighed, thinking about it would just deepen her wound. Taking another spoonful of chocolate cream, Aphrodite stopped midway when she felt his emotions flickered. It changed from calm and cheerful to sad and nostalgic. Secretly, she glanced at the blonde again and used her other ability on him. She will grow up to become a beautiful lady like you. Pervy Aphrodite felt her heart skip a beat at his thought and placed down her spoon. Now, she knew why the little family missed her mother. That woman, Pervy, had probably passed away or didn't live with them anymore. The goddess of love immediately dismissed the latter and went with the first, since just the most stupid woman in the world would decline such love from a handsome man like him. She had seen his face when he talked to his daughter about whatever their topic was, and she had to admit he is handsome. Aphrodite's face fell again. That blonde man, he still held great love for a deceased woman. It made her jealous and sad at the same time. Such strong bond exists between a living mortal and a deceased woman, Aphrodite thought sadly before she let out a dry chuckle. Her respect for the blonde just took up a notch. I feel so self-despite now. What goddess of love I am. Aphrodite let a lone tear roll down her beautiful face as she finished her cake. Placing the much-needed money on the table, she vanished from view without a trace. The mists covered her magic. She had much to think on what to do next. While the situation did little to help her recover from the pain she got from her false relationship with Ares, it did give her some hope to continue her existence, believing that true love exists. In some part of her heart, an image of her standing beside a certain blonde happily latched onto his arm, and a little brunette in front of them began to appear. She wants that image to be true, she wants to experience the feeling of being needed and loved. Maybe just this time. Olympus, Ares' temple. The god of war was having an episode in his own temple. He was enraged, ashamed, and frustrated. It has been a week since that day when he stomped into the temple of Aphrodite and was kicked out by that bitch. She is just a bitch, and she had the courage to do that to him, the god of war. With an empowered punch, Ares destroyed yet another stone pillar in his temple. He would use his power to fix it later, but now, he needed something or someone to vent his frustration on. Normally, he would use Aphrodite, that's what that bitch uses, a plaything to vent his frustration on. Don't think I'm scared of you, Dite. This world is constantly at war, even if it's just some skirmish. I'll regain my power soon, and when that time comes, you will be licking my feet, begging to be my plaything again. The Ares' laughter could be heard across his territory on Olympus, making his servants think the god of war had gone insane. But that thought in mind, Ares flashed away, no need for Aphrodite, he would just use another goddess to vent his frustration on. He is the god of war and he will have everything he wants, even his father's throne. Olympus' main hearth. It's a beautiful day in Olympus, and the goddesses minus Hecate are having their usual meeting at Hestia's main hearth again. Nothing much to say, they were just doing their own things while eating Hestia's homemade food. The goddess of fire, family and the hearth looked around, trying to locate her best friend Aphrodite. 3 days ago, she had suggested to the goddess of love to go to the human realm for a vacation or a break from work. Since then, she hadn't heard anything from her. There she was, seated on a distant log, looking up at the starry sky with a cup of tea in her hand. She had a small smile on her face as she took a sip and continued her stargazing. Many would think it didn't suit her, but for the goddess of love, looking up at the sky always calms her down a little, day or night, it is still the same sky. Being a direct descendant of Uranus has that effect. Hestia walked up to her best friend and offered some cookies which the goddess of love appreciated much. The two sat together, side by side, gazing at the starry sky on Olympus. Colorful stars filled the night sky of Olympus, the highest place in the world. It's so beautiful that Hestia wondered why she could miss such a thing in the past. Beautiful, isn't it, Tia? Aphrodite asked softly and Hestia nodded, looking at the Milky Way in front of them. The scenery almost made the goddess of fire, family and the heart forget her reasons for coming here. She shook her head and looked at her best friend with her amber eyes which was burning very slowly and calmly. How was your trip, Dite? Hestia asked. The goddess of love smiled, her friends always cared for her. It's good, I think. Want to hear something? Aphrodite asked with a big smile and an excited tone which made Hestia smile. Why don't we share it with everyone? The goddess of love nodded at the suggestion and walked up to the group of goddesses, who all smiled when seeing the cheerful goddess returned. With everyone's attention on her, Aphrodite took in a deep breath and began her story about a handsome blonde she had met during her trip to the human realms. Aphrodite's trip day to New York. Aphrodite was stalking her target again, she had been doing that for a while now. The blonde was a big enigma. Based on his stance, the way he moved around, she was sure the blonde was a warrior. But that just raised another question to her though. People these days live in peace and harmony with each other. There might be some skirmish and small battles around the world, but still, those gun-wielding boys wouldn't have such a warrior-like stance. The goddess had also sensed his power and aura. Apparently, her stalking target is a demigod, a strong and experienced one at that too. He had done a good job in hiding and suppressing his energy the whole time. Today, she would make an appearance and try to befriend him. After all, love comes from the simplest relationship, which is friendship. This would be a hard challenge for her, though for the future of her love life, she would try her best. From the information she had gathered from various sources, the blonde is none other than Uzumaki Naruto. And to her surprise, he is an author and a chef. Maybe the chef was too much, owner of a ramen stand would fit him perfectly. His recently released book, Loveless, and its predecessor The Tale of a Gutsy Ninja, have been bestsellers of the year for a long time. Those two books even appear in Athena's Grand Library, which is where all the greatest books in the world from ancient time to this day reside. The Virgin Goddess had once stated that his novels, especially Loveless, are the most wonderful novels she had ever read. The god of sun, Apollo, whose domain also is poetry, had been very excited about the release of a certain orange book named Icha Icha, whose author is also Naruto. A mop of blonde hair at a corner of the street caught her attention. Her target had just walked out of a Japanese restaurant with a very satisfied look on his face. Beatrice wasn't with him. Chance. Aphrodite thought and took a deep breath to calm her nerves. It wouldn't do her any good if she made a bad first impression. She wanted to be loved and needed, not because of her beauty, but because of who she is. It's hard to find a man who loves and treasures his destined one genuinely, but now she had found him, she would take this gamble. After all, she had nothing to lose. At worst, another false love, another pain, another scar. But if he is her true love, her destined one, the one Kate spoke about, just the mere thought of it made her so eager and excited. Too deep in her thought, Aphrodite never noticed that she had been standing in the exact same spot the entire time, and her stalking target was standing in front of her, hands in pockets. "Lady, are you okay?" the blonde asked. He had just had lunch at his favorite Japanese restaurant and was ready to go home with some sushi for his daughter before he noticed this beautiful lady. She had been standing there, looking at him the whole time with an unreadable expression on her face. He could sense some power and aura in her, so most likely, she's a demigod. He didn't know what a demigod was doing here, since most of them decided to go to Camp Half-Blood for protection, and the power he sensed from her wasn't enough to protect her from high-rank monsters. The question pulled Aphrodite out of whatever her thought was and startled the goddess of beauty with the sudden appearance of her stalking target. She jerked, visibly surprised by his sudden appearance, her head slammed into his nose, knocking the blonde off his feet, and stumbled backward while she held her head in slight pain. "Ah, sorry mister." Aphrodite quickly apologized to the blonde and examined his nose, which had blood flowing out of them. She laughed awkwardly at the bad situation. First impression of a broken nose is great. "I'm fine, don't worry," the blonde said while nursing his nose. The impact was stronger than he had expected. He idly wondered if the woman knew how to make her head harder or not. But for another question, the woman was standing there, looking a bit worried, guilty and disappointed. He must do something. "Don't worry lady, I'm fine, really. I'm Naruto, by the way." "Uzumaki Naruto," he said with his hand outstretched and a welcoming smile on his face. Hearing the question, Aphrodite quickly stepped back to gain some distance between them and shook his hand while thinking up a good fake name. "Aitnusa, nice to meet you Naruto-san," Aphrodite said cheerfully, hoping the best for this conversation. By the information she had gathered, Naruto is a man who loves his country even if he is here, in New York. That's why she addressed him in a Japanese way. Maybe, it would give her some advantage, or at least a decent first impression, second impression. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the added suffix to his name. He wouldn't care if she just simply called him Naruto. After all, he didn't care much about honorifics. Now standing at this distance, he could say that she was, no doubt, the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. He also noted that her skin was very smooth and soft too. The two of them stared at each other for what seemed like centuries before Aphrodite broke the handshake and turned around with a red face. Smoke came out of her head. Even if she had heard it more than a billion times, it would never cease to flatter her. He had thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. She knew it due to her ability to read thought. It was cheating to know what people thought of her when love was supposed to be fair and square. She admitted that she would have an edge, but she wanted to be fair in love, and Naruto deserved it too. If she wanted, just a little magic could make him fall head to toes for her. But how can she call their love true if she does it? Aphrodite didn't want that. And so, she deactivated her ability to read thought and turned to face Naruto again. Her face is still a bit red from the mental compliment he unknowingly gave her a moment ago. "Sorry about your nose, Naruto-san, it was just you really surprised me back there," Aphrodite said a little guiltily. If she hadn't been lost in thought, the whole incident wouldn't have happened. Again, Naruto smiled at the girl, telling everything was okay. Aphrodite smiled to herself. Her target is a good person. If not, he would have asked her for money to nurse his broken nose or force her to do something for him. Then just as Aphrodite was about to befriend him and ask for his phone number, an earthquake occurred. It wasn't a natural earthquake from what she sensed. It had celestial power and a strong one at that. The sudden earthquake had made her fall forward and straight into Naruto's chest as he embraced her by instinct. Despite the emergency situation, Aphrodite blushed at the close contact. She didn't think her first encounter with a blonde would go like this. Her heart skipped a beat when she felt his strong arms wrapped about her slim waist, bringing her closer to him. She wanted to know what he was thinking at the moment, but her resolve to make their relationship real stopped her from reading his thoughts. For now, Aphrodite will melt into his embrace. It felt so protective and so warm, it made her think that even fate couldn't do them apart. Tragedy struck each time she found the man of her dreams. But his aura reassured that everything would be alright. Even without her power, she could feel his concern for her being, although she was just another stranger for him. The feeling of it was great. Despite being a bit too hastily, Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, love and lust, had felt her heart flutter again. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye. It appeared again, in the heart of New York. Standing there in all its glory was Hydra, the legendary beast in myths. It had been wreaking havoc around New York for some time now, and Naruto wasn't going to let it do it again after today. Besides, it had been a good choice to trust his instinct and left Beatrice at home, with a little girl around, he couldn't fight full force. The Hydra? What is it doing here, in the heart of New York? Aphrodite mumbled as she narrowed her eyes at the legendary creature that had the ability to grow 2 heads from the one cut in poison, that said to be able to kill a person with just a breath. It was a snake-like creature with 2 strong legs, 7 heads, 2 tails and white stomach. It was covered in green thick scales from head to toes, creating an impenetrable armor. Naruto, hearing the questions, smiled softly at Aphrodite, an action that made the goddess of love blush a little. So you can see it, after all Naruto said, his guess earlier had been confirmed. The woman in his arms is a demigod. Run, find a safe place to hide or return to camp. Leave this place to me. Naruto said as he looked at the rampaging Hydra with narrowed eyes. Releasing the woman in his arms, Naruto began to walk to the heart of New York, where the Hydra was wreaking havoc. Realizing the sudden loss of warmth, Aphrodite looked behind her to see her stalking target surrounded by blue wisps. The scene was so familiar to Aphrodite that she was having a hard time not to believe it. The wisps appeared more and more before swirling around Naruto, totally covering him from view. But the burst of celestial power, the wisps glowed brightly before dissipating themselves, leaving Naruto in his new outfit. Black pant and long-sleeved blue shirt with black leather boot and matching fingerless glove. He also wore a short-sleeved white coat with red flame flickering at the bottom and the kanji for sage in red printed proudly on his back. Steel and determined eyes gazed at the legendary beast. Just as the blonde was about to run toward the beast, he felt a soft hand catch his shoulder and turn him around. "Where are you going?" Aphrodite asked with a mixture of worry and disbelief in her eyes. No demigod had ever challenged that beast and came out alive except Heracles. That beast is a legend. She feared for Naruto's life. If he came to challenge it, would he return safely? She feared the answer. She had just met him, and there was something about him that made her want to believe in him, but she didn't want to lose him so soon. She cursed whatever god or goddess that is messing with her life. It's their first day and the blonde had already claimed a part of her heart. She wanted more, she wanted to know more about Naruto. She didn't want him to die, but she couldn't do anything to help him. A part of it was because of the ancient rules, and another part was because she didn't want him to find out who she was. Her thought was interrupted by Naruto when he laid his hand on her shoulder. "I'll slay that overgrown garden snake," he said gently as he turned around and ran towards the legendary Hydra. Aphrodite just smiled to herself and hoped the best for her stalking target. She would believe him this time, she would trust the aura radiated from him, and she would trust the blood, the power flowing in him. she would trust the son of Hecate. Find a place to hide, we will meet again when the time comes. Naruto shouted over his shoulder as he grinned at the goddess, making her blush with his handsome goofy smile, but nodded nonetheless. Naruto shook his head and focused on the problem ahead. He couldn't let that beast destroy New York any more than it already had. With that thought in mind, he ran at inhuman speed toward where the Hydra was. Under the eyes of mortals, all they saw was an earthquake and a hailstorm. They tried to run and stay as far away from the disaster zone as possible. But unlike them, there was one person who was running in the opposite direction. Naruto was heading towards the Hydra, the legendary beast in myth. He kept his calm and looked at the creature with icy blue eyes. It was spitting acid left and right, destroying buildings with its deadly poison and strong tails. Holding a three-pronged kunai in each hand, Naruto bent his body down till he was near parallel with the ground and stomped his foot. A sounding boom could be heard as the sound barrier was broken. The spot he once stood had become a crater under the force of his stomp. He flew fast and straight to the rampaging Hydra and slashed its leg with his kunai before skidding to a stop behind the legendary beast. Poisonous green blood oozed out of the Hydra's leg where it was slashed before the injury began to heal. It stared down at the mop of blonde hair belonging to the one who had attacked it and roared, spitting acid everywhere. There was a flash of yellow and Naruto vanished. The Hydra looked around, confused for a moment before it roared in pain as its leg was slashed again. It stomped down with its mighty foot, but again, the blonde vanished. Pain coursed through its body once more when its stomach was cut by Naruto. It cocked its 7 heads back and tried to bite the blonde with its rapid head movement, only for Naruto to vanish in a flash of yellow again. The Hydra roared in frustration and looked around, trying to find its target while stomping and spitting acid everywhere. Naruto appeared in a crouched position far away from the beast. Beside him was a three-pronged kunai with some weird kanji on its gripe stabbed into the ground below. He smirked. The Hydra didn't notice him yet. He stood up and closed his eyes, one hand placed over his mouth, his stance widened and his stomach bulged out. Pain. Dukakyu no Jutsu, Naruto thought mentally as he opened his eyes and spewed out a huge fireball which was thrice bigger than his body. Noticing the sudden brightness and heat, the Hydra looked to its left for a moment before its eyes widened. It stumbled back a bit to gain some distance, its 7 heads looking at the hurling fireball, with bulged out mouths before it spat out 7 torrents of acid which combined into one, determined to extinguish the dangerous technique with its poison. The two techniques collided with each other and came to a stalemate. Smoke came out where the two techniques tried to overwhelm each other. Naruto, seeing the situation, punched his gut with his other hand, forcing magical power to rush into his mouth, enhancing the fireball. With its caster's reinforcement magic, the fireball became bigger and consumed the torrent of poison in its heat and collided into the legendary Hydra, knocking the beast off its foot and fell back. Naruto wiped the sweats that had appeared due to the heat and the hard stalemate with the Hydra. He gazed at the fallen Hydra and smirked. Naruto thought it finished as he picked up the three-pronged kunai and walked to where the Hydra was. But Aphrodite, the goddess of love, had listened to Naruto and went to find a place to hide. Currently, she was hiding behind a large advertisement board on top of a skyscraper. Very coincidentally, that skyscraper was very near where the fight between Hydra and Naruto was going on. Suppressing her power to that of a normal demigod so as not to attract the attention of the Hydra or Naruto, Aphrodite watched the fight silently with sparkles in her eyes as she was amazed by Naruto's skill. The fight between her stalking target and the legendary beast Hydra was awesome to say the least. The blonde is, no doubt, the strongest demigod to ever exist. His physical power has to be very strong, considering he can cut through the Hydra's scales and how he leaves a crater on the street with just a stomp. But that isn't all. Naruto also is adept in magic. Proof is that he can spew out a huge fireball, which can overwhelm the torrent of acid spat out of the Hydra mouths. Even his speed is a wonder in itself. She couldn't lay her hand on it though. The way Naruto flashed here and there with lightning speed was amazing. From what she knew, it could be a teleport technique, which is quite easy, but the gap between two flashes is too short. Even Zeus, who has control over lightning, can't go left and right with lightning speed. Sure, the god of sky can enhance his speed with lightning, but it's still his physical speed. Teleport is the only way to do that, but it has a gap of time before it can be used again, which is why never has teleport been used in battle. The technique Naruto used was instantaneous though. Aphrodite furrowed her eyebrows in thought and couldn't come up with an answer, so she decided to continue watching the fight instead. She didn't want to miss this awesome fight. Gazing down at the fighting scene below, Aphrodite's eyes immediately widened in awe and shock when Naruto held a blue sphere of spiraling energy in his hand. That technique, she thought with a mixture of disbelief and shock. That technique, she knew that technique. The sight of him holding a sphere of spiraling blue energy was similar to the one she had seen in the Titanomachy. Aphrodite closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember something from ancient time, something similar to the scene that was occurring below at the moment. Cocytus's core, that name suddenly popped up in her mind, and the goddess gazed down again. Cocytus's core is a well-known technique of Hecate, who has used it in the Titanomachy to open the final fight between gods and titans. If she remembered correctly, Cocytus's core is a canon-type technique. Hecate controls her wisps, which are the spirits of Cocytus, and her energy into one point, creating a blue sphere of power. Then, she moves the wisps in every direction and maintains the sphere at the same time, making it extremely difficult to do. The technique had dealt a devastating strike to the Titans, making them unprepared to the rain of attack thrown by the gods and lost at the war. Aphrodite shuddered at the thought of casting such a technique in the heart of New York. It would turn this place into a wasteland. Just as she was about to come down to stop the blonde from destroying New York, she noticed something different. The sphere in Naruto's hand was much smaller than Cocytus's core, which was the side of a plane. Naruto's sphere didn't have any sign that it would grow bigger than it already had. The goddess of love decided to just stay and watch the fight from afar, while thinking about how much of a powerhouse Naruto was. But Naruto. Rushing at the fallen Hydra with a basketball-sized blue sphere with spiraling energy in one hand and a three-pronged kunai in another was Naruto. He was rushing at the Hydra at high speed, while occasionally throwing kunai around the legendary beast. He smirked when everything had been readied and vanished in a flash of yellow. Naruto, this is a technique that I learned from a fight with your mother. Even if it can't compete with its counterpart, I'm sure it will help you in the future. Its called image of a blonde man in his mid-20s appeared in Naruto's mind as he reappeared again above the unprotected stomach of the Hydra. Rasengan. Naruto shouted out the name of his technique as he let gravity take control of his body and fell down, slamming the basketball-sized blue sphere of spiraling energy onto the white stomach of the Hydra. But Aphrodite. Incredible, the goddess of love thought with eyes widened in amazement. To think just a small sphere could deal that much damage. Apparently, the technique was named Rasengan if what she heard was true. The blonde had flashed into the air just above the stomach of the Hydra and let it tasted the power of his technique. The Rasengan had grinded through the Hydra's scales and shredded its skin into nothing, leaving a noticeable mark where it was hit. But that's not all. Naruto flushed away again and repeated the process in several different places on the Hydra's body, causing it to roar in pain. Aphrodite watched on in amazement as her stalking target repeatedly flashing and attacking the Hydra at the same time. Maybe she understood it now. Naruto had used his kunai to flash away, proof that he had been flashing from kunai to kunai several times now. But how he could do that was still a mystery to her. But Naruto stopped his relentless assault on the fallen Hydra as he flashed to a safe place, maintaining a safe distance between him and the legendary beast. Its scales were damaged heavily because of multiple Rasengan, golden dust flying out of its injuries. The Hydra was in its weakened state. Naruto smirked, now is the time for him to put an end to this fight. His father's on-mutant magic had rendered the Hydra's regeneration useless, even if it lasted only for a short time. The three-pronged kunai in his hands were what his father had left for him before they went to seal the Kyuubi no Yoko. He was 16 at that time when that monster was sealed into him by his father, who sacrificed his life to prevent Kyoto from being destroyed by the Kyuubi. Use this power wisely and don't let it control you, Naruto. I trust you and your mother too. Make us proud. The same blonde man appeared in Naruto's mind again with his back facing him and a thumb up over his shoulder. He wants to be like his father. A hero, a great father and a faithful husband. That's why I never hated him for sealing Kyuubi into him. That's why he fought so hard. That's why he would use this power to protect the people in New York and his daughter from this monster. Naruto rolled up his right sleeve, revealing a circular tattoo of kanji from 1 to 9. He bit his left thumb and swiped his blood across the kanji for 1. There was a moment of silence before his celestial power increased by a vast amount. Red energy swirled around his frame as the originally blue wisps turned red under his power. Aphrodite. The goddess of beauty, love and lust was watching the fight between her stalking target and the legendary Hydra with great interest. After flashing away to stop his relentless assault on the fallen Hydra, Naruto had been standing there with his eyes closed before he bit his thumb and wiped it across a part of a tattoo on his right arm. She didn't know what he was doing before she was frozen in shock when something hit her. Glancing at the scene below, her eyes widened in shock when Naruto's energy changed from blue to red. Even the feeling of it also changed. She almost vomited from the impure feeling the blonde was radiating. It felt so tainted and hateful. That power Tiffin's Aphrodite thought shakily as she remembered the monstrous being with power that could rival Kronos. Zeus had managed to defeat him and trapped him under Mount Athena, but it was the combined power of every gods and goddess that had done the work. Why did Naruto have access to such power? How? Aphrodite watched in amazement as the tainted energy became more and more neutral before it returned to Naruto, whose celestial power was now on par with a minor god if not more. His eyes had changed to blood-red slit eyes that made him look so feral and wild, even if his aura had returned to calm and focus again. Naruto outstretched his hand, the winds picked up and swirled around him. Blue wisps appeared more and more before they were molded into a regular Rasengan. Naruto became the eye of the storm as wind swirled around his frame like a tornado. The Rasengan now had 4 white wind blades circling around it, making it look like a shuriken if Aphrodite remembered correctly. The screeching noise could be heard even from her place. The goddess stared at the wind-infused Rasengan in awe as she tried to analyze the technique. She was sure that even she couldn't create a wind blade with that much power. Those white wind blades surrounding the Rasengan were much more potent and stronger than her own. She idly wondered if Hecate had helped her son archive such power. Naruto. With his most destructive technique in his hand, Naruto ran toward the Hydra and jumped high into the air. The beast was trying to stand up, his magic which neutralized its healing factor was beginning to wear up. He had to finish this fight right now. Aiming at the white stomach of the legendary monster, Naruto used all his might to throw his technique down, straight to the Hydra. Rasen Shuriken. Naruto shouted out the name of his self-created technique and watched as it slammed into the Hydra, pushing it down again and exploding. Aphrodite. No words could be used to describe her thought as she saw the blue dome of energy and wind blades down there. It was so strong and destructive that she had no doubt the Hydra had died. Due to her affinity to wind thanks to Uranus's blood, Aphrodite could feel millions upon millions of mini wind blades in there, cutting and shredding the legendary beast into nothingness. Even its scale couldn't help it from surviving this attack. Hecate, you really have one hell of a son. Aphrodite thought with a tired sigh. She admitted that Naruto was strong, but that only brought trouble to him when Zeus found out about his existence. Considering the bastard was extremely proud of his sons who were all heroes in Greek, the fact that some puny demigod was stronger than his sons would make him go crazy. And then, that bastard would smite Naruto with his master bolt, end of story. Of course Hecate wouldn't let it happen, and she would be there to stop him too, but the future couldn't be expected. She could only hope the best for her stalking target for now. Naruto. The Hydra had been shredded into bits and pieces and disappeared into nothingness. The blue wisps and energy surrounding Naruto had also faded away. Again, being a normal mortal, Uzumaki Naruto made his way to his precious home, where his daughter was waiting for her sushi, which had been forgotten during the fight between her father and the legendary beast named Hydra. The Rasen Shuriken slammed into the unprotected white stomach of the Hydra and exploded into a blue dome of energy and wind blades, totally engulfing that overgrown garden snake and cutting it into million pieces. Aphrodite said as she made random gestures with her hands, trying to describe the scene but failed miserably since no one understood what she wanted to show with her hands. The smile on the goddess of love's face never once left her face as she told them about her possible boyfriend. He is a strong man, I will give him that. Artemis said with her eyes closed and a cookie in her mouth. From what Aphrodite had told, she could say that the blonde her fellow goddess was stalking was indeed very powerful. Brave enough to engage in combat with the Hydra without any preparation, and strong enough to finish that beast without a bruise. Even Heracles, who had been the strongest demigod, the pride of Zeus, couldn't do that when he faced the beast. Hera also gave a nod of confirmation. She admired those with great power and good personality, and so far, she hadn't heard anything bad about the blonde from Aphrodite, except that tainted and impure energy he used to finish the beast. The story was pretty interesting too. It wasn't common to see a demigod facing a legendary beast such as Hydra and win without a scratch. Monster roaming around freely wasn't that uncommon, but to see a Hydra in New York, where Olympus currently resides, was pretty strange. With Artemis and her hunter hunting monsters all around the world every day, how could they miss such a large tainted energy irradiated from that beast? Hera furrowed her eyebrows in thought for a moment but decided against it and just sighed since that wasn't that much of a problem. No one is perfect, and gods are no exceptions. Maybe the huntress just lost her focus when flying around New York in her chariot, hence missing the Hydra. Hestia smiled and used her power to heat up the air around them a little since it was getting cold. Gods couldn't catch a cold, but she wanted her fellow goddesses to be comfortable. The story could take a while after all. Aphrodite's trip day 3 New York. Aphrodite was running around her newly bought house, trying to get her gears and equipment ready before beginning her plan. Yesterday, when she was just about to befriend the handsome and powerful blonde, that troublesome Hydra had appeared out of nowhere and ruined everything. But, after some more information digging from various sources, the goddess had managed to get Naruto's address and phone number. Today, she would make her appearance again and tried to befriend the blonde by being his new neighbor. Standing in front of a mirror, Aphrodite was trying various clothes combinations to see which one was best. Pink shirt and blue jeans. Too normal. Pink Victorian style dress. Too fancy. Pink nightgown. Too sexy. Pink blouse and black skirt. This will do. The goddess of love mumbled to herself as she stared into the mirror, taking various poses to see if she was sexy enough to seduce her soon-to-be blonde neighbor. She wore a plain pink blouse which revealed her milky white skin and bare small shoulders. There also was a heart-shaped ruby with silver lining hanging on a silver necklace placed on her neck. Her blazing red hair was allowed to flow freely on her back, with her signature autumn leaves on one side of her head just above her right ear, 2 long bangs framing her face, and several strands fell onto her face. Her short black skirt only reached her mid-thigh, revealing her long and slender white legs. She also wore black high shoes to increase her height a little. Her ruby red eyes gazed carefully up and down her body, looking for anything that was imperfect in her eyes. After about 15 minutes, Aphrodite finally nodded and applied some light pink lipstick and perfume. The goddess winked at herself in the mirror and ran out of her room. The day was an important day for the goddess of beauty, love and lust. But Naruto. The day was a nice, sunny day, and Naruto had just woken up from his sleep. The battle with that Hydra yesterday had been tiresome, and the scold he got from Beatrice for not remembering to buy her some sushi didn't help much either. Sometimes, he wished she had his addiction to ramen instead of sushi like her mother. Life would be much easier. Naruto crawled out of bed and walked out of the room. He turned left to the room of his little girl and opened the door. Beatrice was sleeping peacefully and drooling on her teddy panda. A small smile graced his face as he called out. "Du-chan is going to make breakfast, wake up and get ready soon, Beatrice." The little girl just mumbled a weak yes before trying to get some more sleep. The blonde walked out of the room and made his way to the kitchen. He had some omelette to make. But Aphrodite took a deep breath to calm down her nerves a little. She was standing at the entrance of Naruto's house, which coincidentally was next to her. Nervously, the goddess knocked and waited for her handsome blonde to open the door. She could hear footsteps approaching and braced herself. "Hi." Came greeted a little girl about 4 to 5 years old with brown hair. Aphrodite and the girl stared at each other before the goddess snapped out of her stupor because of the unexpected greeting from the little girl. She knew this girl was Beatrice, Naruto's daughter, and of course they lived together, but she had expected the blonde to come and greet her. It's still pretty early in the morning and kids should stay in bed this time. Calming herself down, the goddess continued her plan despite the situation. She knew nothing about the little girl except her name and her relationship with her stalking target. Naruto was kind and all, but his girl might be different. And from what she usually heard, little girls were very protective of their father. Again, Aphrodite mentally cursed whoever was messing with her grand glorious plan. "Ah, who are you, little girl?" Aphrodite asked, faking curiosity as she played as a stranger to the Uzumaki household. Beatrice stared curiously at the beautiful lady in front of her with her lip a thin line, trying to remember if she had met her before. Waiting too long for a response, Aphrodite bent down to ruffle the girl's head. "Is anyone beside you home?" Aphrodite asked again, only for her face to be introduced to the door, which was slammed by Beatrice. Holding her nose, which had blood flowed out, Aphrodite turned around, tears in her eyes for the, again, unexpected impact. "I was right, kids are all evil." The goddess thought as she used her reality warping to nurse her broken nose. The door behind her clicked and she turned around again with a cheerful smile on her face. "Nice to meet you, I'm Dite Venusa, and I will be your neighbor from now on," Aphrodite said as she bowed down a little to show her gratitude and a bit of her cleavage to the blonde who just stepped out of his house. "Dite-san?" Naruto asked with his head tilted to one side and a little pink on his cheeks. Of course he remembered the lady, he had just met her yesterday after all. And who would forget such a beautiful lady? Despite being a married man, Naruto couldn't help but stare at her chest and blushed. He would give the lady a perfect 10 for her wonderful figure and curves. Hearing her fake name, Aphrodite looked up slowly and opened her eyes curiously to see none other than Uzumaki Naruto. The goddess faked surprise and pointed at the blonde. "Naruto-san? You are my new neighbor?" "It seems so," Dite-san, Naruto said as he smiled at the beautiful lady and stepped aside. "Would you like to grace our humble abode with your present, Dite-heim?" Naruto said teasingly as he bowed mockingly to the, unknown to him, goddess, making her blush and could only nod. She entered the normal 2-story house and took off her shoes, followed behind her was Naruto, who had just locked the door. He smiled and led her to the dining table. Apparently, the Uzumaki house was having breakfast when she came. Aphrodite glared at Beatrice a little for slamming the door in her face, but got over it moments later. Beatrice was still a child after all. Taking a seat, the goddess looked right and saw an apron-clad Naruto bringing food to them. There were omelets, some bread and, interesting enough, ramen. The blonde took a seat next to her and put his hand together, an action followed by Beatrice and Aphrodite a moment later. Idadakamasa with a chorus, the three picked up their spoon and knife, or in Naruto's case, chopsticks, and began eating. Aphrodite sliced off a piece of egg and put it in her mouth. Her eyes widened when a strange sensation hit her. DTT, this food, it's on par with Hesja's homemade. Aphrodite thought with widened eyes and looked at the food in shock. How is the food, Dite-san? Naruto asked with his usual friendly smile, snapping the goddess out of her shock. Aphrodite nodded happily. It's delicious, Naruto-san. And just call me Dite. Thanks. Living and raising this little girl on my own has made me quite good at cooking. I will only call you Dite if you call me by my name too. Aphrodite nodded and continued to eat her food. Uzumaki Naruto truly was a one-of-a-kind man. He had strong love, great power, and now, a good skill in cooking too. The goddess watched in amusement as Naruto scolded Beatrice for eating too fast. He loved his daughter with all his heart, but he didn't spoil her that much. Children need to be scolded to mature. Recommended Ost Blue No Exorcist movie. Nah, Naruto-kun, where is your wife? Aphrodite asked. She had to be sure about what she was doing. The blonde was a married man, and he still loved his wife dearly, that much she knew. But if her assumption was wrong, if his wife was alive, she would gladly step back and wait for her next chance to come. She wouldn't break a happy family apart. Naruto's face fell when his wife was mentioned and put his chopstick down. He looked straight ahead, towards the wall. She has died because of childbirth. Naruto said softly as he looked at the picture of his lovely wife Provia hanging on the wall. Aphrodite followed his gaze and looked at the picture too. Provia was a beautiful woman, with brown hair flowing down her back and matching eyes. She wore a black dress with yellow flowers decorating. Behind her was the setting sun, and on her face was a content smile. Silently, Aphrodite turned her gaze to Naruto. Sorry, Naruto-kun, I didn't know what the goddess said softly. She truly felt sorry for the happy family. Beatrice, innocent as she was, just continued to eat her food while silently listening to what the two adults were talking about. Her father had already told her about her mother, and she was happy enough with just her father being here. Don't worry, I have gotten over it already. Naruto said as he smiled at the goddess, making her smile back at him. The breakfast went on without any more conversation after that. Have a nice day, Dite-chan. Naruto said as he led Aphrodite to the door. The same to you too, Naruto-kun. But that said, Aphrodite turned around and left. In her heart, a decision had already been made. Love is wonderful, and she wouldn't want to miss the chance to taste love with a man like Naruto. I returned home after that and thought up a new plan to seduce him. Aphrodite finished her story with a smile on her face and looked around, waiting for her fellow goddess's reaction. Dite, if you have already bought a house in New York, does that mean you are going to live there? Athena asked with narrowed eyes and low tone, but it went unnoticed by the goddess of love. I'm going to live there, make Naruto love me, and then I'll marry him, Aphrodite said with a blush on her face. In all her immortal life, all she wanted to was to found a happy family with her husband and have a lot of kids with him. However, she hadn't had a choice in the matter when she was married to Hephaestus by Zeus's order. She hadn't once married a mortal or demigod in the past because she knew they didn't love her and instead just lusted after her beauty, so the thought of finally marrying a fine man like Naruto made her excited. Athena stood up, her white hairs hid her eyes from view. She walked to where Aphrodite was, making the goddess of love look up curiously. Slap. Every goddess present widened their eyes at the unexpected action coming from Athena. The goddess of wisdom and battle had just slapped her best friend, Aphrodite. The wind breeze causing Athena's white hair to sway out of the way, revealing her hardened, icy blue eyes shining in the night sky of Olympus. Better hold yourself, Aphrodite. Athena said calmly as she waited for her friend to recover from her slap. What are you doing, Athena? Hestia asked, concerned for her best friend and curious at her niece's action at the same time. Every other goddess was paying their undivided attention to Athena, waiting for her answer. The goddess of wisdom and battle is one of the most level-headed gods in Olympus. She wouldn't do things if not for a good reason and always stayed calm in all situations. To see her openly slapped Aphrodite in the face was really something. It's none of your concern, Aunt Hestia. Nope, it's my right to know the reasons for you to do this in my territory, Athena Hestia said calmly while sipping her tea. She didn't even flare her power, and Athena had already known she would be in big trouble if her reasons didn't satisfy the goddess of the hearth. Despite not being one of the 12 Olympians, Hestia had the power to be one. She chose to be an Olympian and became a minor goddess instead. She didn't want to deal with those troublesome political problems and the damn paperwork one Olympian must do every day. It was her choice, not because she was insufficient for the position. Athena knew she could beat her into a pulp if she wanted, but she also knew Hestia wasn't one to use her power to hurt others. She preferred peace and verbal methods to solve problems more. Just as the goddess of wise and battle opened her mouth to answer the question, the sudden increase of celestial power of none other than Aphrodite caught her attention. With a quick reaction of drawing Aegis out of the air to intercept a blast of air casted by the goddess of love, Athena flipped back, keeping a safe distance between her and Aphrodite. The goddess of love stood up with her right palm pointed at Athena, a pink aura swirling about her face serious, but had a bit of confusion and disappointment on it. "If this is a joke, then it's a bad joke of your Athena," Aphrodite said seriously as she used her reality warping to nurse her tingling cheek. Athena stood up from her crouched down position and looked at the goddess of love seriously. Friend or not, she couldn't let Aphrodite do whatever she wanted. "You are being too impatient and forget something important, Aphrodite," Athena said calmly, keeping her guard up and preparing for the unavoidable fight with her best friend. "What do you mean?" the goddess of love asked, her eyes narrowed at Athena. Every other goddess was also increasing their power, preparing to stop the fight that was likely unavoidable. Athena and Aphrodite are best friends, but the two just like fire and water. One believes in logical thinking while the other listens to what her heart and feelings tell her. Firstly, that Uzumaki Naruto is just a demigod, he can't live with you forever, even if you manage to make him love you. Secondly, Ares will come to kill him if he finds out about you too. Don't ever think a demigod can defeat a god. Killing a Hydra doesn't mean he can kill a god. Athena said calmly with her eyes closed. She wanted her friend to find true love and live happily with that person, but now wasn't the right time to do so. She and Ares just broke up, and the god of war was still very pissed about the matter, even if he was the cause of it. That warmonger is very possessive. What was his, even after he had abandoned it, was still his. Aphrodite wasn't an exception. Ares would find Naruto and kill him if he found out about his relationship with Aphrodite. Recommend Ostpass story fairy tale. Aphrodite just stood there, her pink aura faded away, her hands lower, and her eyes were shadowed by her hair. Silence reigned the main hearth as Athena also just stood there, hoping her friend would see her reasons for doing so. The goddess of wisdom and battle must admit that Uzumaki Naruto was a very good man from the story Aphrodite told them. But the goddess of love might bring doom to the Uzumaki household if she lived with him. And how much pain it would cause her when he died. Uzumaki Naruto is a demigod, a being that had little to no difference to a mortal. He lives and he dies, of old age or accident. They are fragile beings that can be broken any moment. Aphrodite must know that too since she had tasted that pain before. Every mortal and demigod man she loved all died before she even realized it. Adonis is a good example. Aphrodite and Adonis were lovers in the past, and Ares was the main cause of his death. The goddess of love had fallen into depression after her lover's death, which she presumed was an accident, since no proof pointed out Ares was the culprit. That's also when Aphrodite came to Ares, tricked by his sweet words. Athena didn't want her friend to repeat her painful past. Aphrodite shook her head. Athena frowned. Why Aphrodite? Why couldn't you see my reasons? The goddess of wisdom and battle thought as her celestial power increased. Forget him, Aphrodite, he can't be with you. No, it's you who can't be by his side. Remember your past. What fate awaits your lover? All of them were dead, not of old ages then by accident or Ares. Naruto wouldn't be an exception. Athena said, slowly losing her calm behavior. At this time, every other goddess just watched on, this was Aphrodite's problem. All of them, except Hera and Hestia, had tasted the pain of losing someone precious to them in the past because of who they were. They could see Athena's reasons for doing so. She just wanted to protect her friend from that pain. After all, she also was its victim. Others didn't know, but Athena had loved before. Real love. But after the pain of losing him, Athena had frozen her heart. She had soon realized that mortals and gods couldn't come together because of their differences. Gods could live forever and forever until mortals ceased to exist. She had soon realized that and stopped herself from loving anyone too much. She swore to be a virgin goddess and became the person she was today. If she loved anyone, she would create a brainchild with them and then return to Olympus, never to be bothered again. It had been that way for eons. Her heart was frozen, she wouldn't love anyone deeply and then lose them again. Athena stood there, trying to make her best friend see her reasons. But why? Aphrodite shook her head again. Why you couldn't see my reasons, Aphrodite? Athena all but shouted. Her celestial power increased more and more, various weapons appeared behind her out of nowhere. As Zeus's favorite daughter, she had all the weapons in the world. From Excalibur to Gungnir and Longinus, from pistol, bazooka and missiles. All hovering behind her, awaiting their order. You won't understand, Athena. The joy of love Aphrodite began calmly but was cut off and a spear launched toward her, leaving a cut on her cheek. The goddess of love didn't even bat an eyelash as she continued to reason with her best friend. Athena, have you ever felt the warmth of being embraced in the arms of the man you loved? Have you ever felt the sensation of wanting to be by his side every single second? Have you ever felt the sensation of being a normal housewife, a normal woman? Aphrodite said calmly with a smile on her face as she walked toward the goddess of wisdom and battle, ignoring the rain of weapons coming her way as Athena decided to make her realize her reasons with power. She understood Athena's reasons to do so, but she couldn't and wouldn't back down. Love is her reason to continue existing and seeking true love is the goal of her life. She wouldn't give up on her goal. Pain. She had tasted too much pain before, she wouldn't mind another scar in her heart. There was something that Athena didn't understand even with her superior intelligence. How could Aphrodite do that? She is the oldest of them, even older than Hestia and Hera, so why couldn't she realize that gods and mortals can't live together? If she continued, it would just hurt her more. The rain of weapons continued launching toward the goddess of love, cuts appeared on her cloth, blood oozed out here and there, but she just continued to walk toward Athena. Athena, love is a wonderful thing that even I can't understand fully. That's why I seek love like you seek knowledge. Have you ever considered abandoning the knowledge you seek even if it's vast just like the universe? Athena shook her head, the rain of weapons still continued, but it always missed its target. Have you ever thought of giving up on knowledge because it's too hard to understand? Athena shook her head again. Aphrodite smiled gently as she embraced the goddess in her arms. Me too, seeking true love is my goal of existence, I won't give up until I have archived my goal. The pains I have felt before are just a trial for me. I believe that if I can overcome those trials, I will achieve my goal. That's why I won't give up. I have had so many scars in my heart that I lost count of them. Aphrodite chuckled dryly as her eyes softened. Thank you, Athena. With that, the rain of weapons stopped. Athena buried her head in Aphrodite's shoulder and hugged the goddess back. She couldn't understand Aphrodite's reasons, but she would support her with this decision. She could feel her unwavering will and determination through her words and actions. Now, Athena just hoped the best for her friend and helped her if she could. Every other goddesses present all had tears in their eyes as they thought about Aphrodite's words. That was unexpected, again. It was unusual to see the cheerful, happy-go-lucky goddess with that much determination and passion. End of past story fairy tale. About Ares and the rules. Athena asked softly, and Aphrodite smiled brightly as she released the goddess to see the usual calm and level-head goddess of wisdom with red eyes, indicating that she had been crying. I will beat Ares if he dares to come and screws the rules, the goddess of love said, proudly, making every other goddess smile at her. With that, the night passed peacefully, the main hearth was filled with laughter after that. Morning came and each goddess teleported to their temple or in Aphrodite's case, her house in mortal realms, to do their works or plan, leaving the Hestia with her heart now looking like a battlefield with various weapons. Who will clean this mess? The goddess of fire, family and the hearth asked herself and sighed. Guess the answer was her. Olympus, Hera's temple. Hera, the goddess of marriage, motherhood and woman, had just teleported to her temple after the usual meeting of the goddesses ended. Usually, she would just forget it to do her daily work, but this meeting had left her with much to think about. Aphrodite was just like her. The two of them were blessed with eternal and unrivaled beauty, but to them, it was like a curse. Being the goddess of marriage and all, but she didn't have a happy experience with it. In the past, she married Zeus just after the Titanomachy, and people thought she loved him. But it was the exact opposite. She, Hera, hated her husband, Zeus, more than anyone in this world. That bastard was the bane of her existence. It was after the founding of Olympus that Zeus proposed to her. He lusted after her beauty and proposed to her and was refused for more than she could remember. Zeus, the bastard he was, decided to disguise as an injured and rain-soaked little bird flew into her temple on a stormy day, which was caused by him. Pitying the poor bird, she had hugged it in her chest and regretted it a moment later when the bird turned into Zeus and raped her to marry him. That was why she had married Zeus in the first place. As the goddess of marriage, she had to remain loyal to him in all situations and offered everything she had to him. She had never loved Zeus, never has and never will either. Hera was a prideful goddess, she was proud of her position as the queen of Olympus, she was proud of her power, and she was extremely proud of her beauty. Just she and Aphrodite knew how much of a curse beauty was. Because of her beauty, she was raped to marry that bastard Zeus. He lusted after her beauty, and after got what he wanted, he went on with his old way and had sex with other women. Even if she didn't love Zeus, that was a blow to her pride as his official wife, and also a blow to her pride as a woman. If she remembered correctly, Zeus would only sleep with her to take her first time once a year when she used her sacred bath to purify herself and regain her virginity. It made her feel like she was no more than a piece of meat for the bastard. She couldn't understand the pain of losing someone precious to her like other goddesses, since she must be loyal to Zeus, and therefore, she hadn't loved anyone. But she could understand Aphrodite's reasons. Those sensations, those feelings the goddess of love talked about, she had felt them before. It was her dream to found a happy family and have a faithful husband. 4 years ago, when she found out about Thalia Grace's existence, Olympus had been put through a week of unending stormy and gray sky. Zeus had sired yet another child and broken the promise he made on river Styx. After much tantrum and argument, Zeus had agreed to seal his daughter inside a tree, sacrificing his own daughter to create a barrier around Camp Half-Blood. Since then, the two hadn't exchanged a word with each other. Hera because she didn't care about what happened to the king of Olympus, he could fade away for all she cared. Zeus because he was angry at the goddess for making him seal his own daughter into a tree. Hera didn't hate the child, but she saw things better than Zeus. Because of the tension that existed between the three brothers, the promise to never have any more demigods had been made, and Zeus, as the king of Olympus, must keep his promise. But he was the one to break it first and then throw a tantrum about it. If Thalia Grace continued to live, her life would be in constant danger for having large celestial power and being the daughter of Zeus. The prophecy about a child of the big three bringing about trouble for Olympus would become real if that girl lived on. All she did was protect Olympus, and what she got was a slap to the face and a lot of insults thrown her way by her so-called husband. Hera's patience was running thin with Zeus, the two were at their last straw. Aphrodite had unknowingly made something within Hera stirred to awaken. Something that had been buried deep inside her after her failed attempt to dethrone Zeus in the past. Her will to not give up on her dream and fight for what was right. A smirk made its way to her beautiful face as an evil glint appeared in her blood-red eyes. She wasn't one to break those happy family and couple apart, but who said she couldn't compete with Aphrodite for the blonde demigod? But first, she had to make sure her decision was correct. Using her power, Hera sat on her throne and watched the enigma which was Uzumaki. Naruto conversed with Aphrodite, who had just teleported there to continue her plan of seducing the blonde. Thanks for watching this video. Part 2 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye. It's mine, Aphrodite said firmly with the fire of determination burning in her eyes. Nope. It's mine. Beatrice said back as she glared at the goddess of love. On the sideline, Naruto was watching the two with a nervous smile on his face. It has been 2 weeks since Dite Venusa became his neighbor. Ever since she found out he was her neighbor, the beautiful lady had been constantly coming here to have his food. She said she was still looking for a job and her money was limited at that time. Do I have any say in it? Naruto asked only for him to receive a chorus no from the two, making him sweat. He had just returned home with enough materials to cook ramen for Ichiraku, and what greeted him was the fighting scene of his neighbor and daughter over a pudding cake. Aside from being an author, Naruto loved ramen to the point he had mastered the art of cooking it in just one day and decided to open a ramen stand himself. Ichiraku was its name. People would think opening a ramen stand in New York was crazy, but after the first day, Ichiraku had become infamous with its delicious food and handsome chef. Back to the main problem, Aphrodite and Beatrice were still fighting over the pudding. They were bucking their heads together with their hands pinching and stretching the other's cheeks. A tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead as he walked to them, grabbed the pudding and ate it in one go. The expressions on Aphrodite and Beatrice's face were priceless. They stood there for a second before they slumped down, black clouds hovering above their heads as the two silently cried for the death of their precious pudding. I can't believe it, Naruto-kun has just killed a pudding. Aphrodite said as she used her handkerchief to wipe the fresh tears that were rolling on her cheeks. Du-chan is cruel. He ate the pudding. Beatrice said as she cried for the unfortunate pudding that had been unfortunately eaten by her father, who had no interest in love and sweets. Another tick mark appeared on Naruto's head as he turned toward them. You two aren't going to eat it either. And don't talk like that. You two make me feel like the worst person in the world right now. Naruto said with his eyebrow twitching continuously and left the room to prepare the materials. He needed to do that before opening Ichiraku. Washing dishes and bowls, preparing proper ingredients, although Dite Venusa was an employee at his ramen stand, she really sucks at doing things like this, and so, he had to do it instead. He unconsciously remembered the day when he hired the redhead. That day was horrible to say the least. Naruto house 2 weeks ago. After the usual meeting between the goddesses ended, Aphrodite had wasted no time teleporting to her house, changing into some casual clothes and visiting Naruto's house. She was wearing the clothes she used the day before, since her object of affection seemed to like it, if the small blush on his cheeks whenever he looked at her was any indication. The goddess smiled sweetly at the blonde and followed him home. Again, it was still early in the morning, and little Beatrice had already sat on the dining table, waiting for her father to finish making breakfast. Aphrodite flashed a smile at the little girl, hoping to calm things down between them. Beatrice looked at her for a second before looking away, taking no interest in the, in her opinion, creepy lady. Aphrodite's sweat dropped inside, she had to admit that she was extremely suck at making a first impression. You came again, Dite-chan. Naruto said with a questioning look on his face. Not that he had a problem with having a guess as beautiful as her, but he wanted to know why. Hearing the question, the goddess quickly thought of a solution. Miraculously, a light bulb appeared on her head and immediately, she took on a sad face and looked at the blonde almost guiltily. I just moved here and don't have any job. My money is limited and my cooking is horrible. I thought I could come here to rely on you since you are my only acquaintance here. Aphrodite stood up, still looking at the ground below. But if you don't want me here, thinking that I'm a nuisance, then I will gladly leave, Naruto-san. The goddess said, her tone sounded almost broken, and began walking to the door. Naruto felt like he was the worst person in the world for making the beautiful redhead feel like that and ran after her. Catching her delicate hand in his and scratched his cheek with his other hand, a blush on his face. Her hand was soft and small in his one. I wouldn't mind you coming here, Dai-chan. And if you wanted, you could help me at Ichiraku. Naruto said quietly. Aphrodite turned around and hugged the blonde to her chest, even if it wasn't as big as some other goddesses. She still took pride in her chest since it went well with her body, and still bigger than some, not too big but not small either. Naruto tried to struggle with his face as red as Aphrodite's hair, but to no avail. The woman's grip was extremely strong for someone like her. The goddess was smiling happily while unknowingly suffocating Naruto in her chest. After a while, Aphrodite finally released Naruto and was horrified when she saw his blue face and a trickle of blood flowed out of his nose. Naruto-kun, stay with me, Naruto-kun. Aphrodite called out to the blonde while violently shaking him. At the dining table, Beatrice's stomach growled and she looked at the funny scene with a sweat drop. Later that day. Tonight was the first night of Aphrodite's job and she was nervous but excited at the same time. According to Naruto, her job was to take orders from customers and bring food to them. The blonde hadn't told her what she should wear, so here she was, standing before the mirror again, various clothes and uniforms hovering around her, waiting to be chosen. Aphrodite snapped her finger, and in a blink, she was wearing another cloth. The cloth consisted of a white long-sleeved shirt with red trims going from her shoulder down to her wrists, and a black skirt with golden trim every crinkle. Her hair still flowed down her back gracefully, but she had bangs covering her forehead and two long bangs framing her face. Instead of her signature autumn leaf, Aphrodite had a white headband made of silk on her head, which had a white small ribbon just above her right ear, replacing her leaf. Her ruby necklace was displaced, shining in the darkness in her room. Aphrodite nodded, she looked like a delicate and modest girl now. With her clothes done, Aphrodite opened her door to see Naruto waiting for her. He wore a long-sleeved white shirt just like her, blue jeans with no decoration and nothing more. Aphrodite sighed, even if he was going to be a chef, his cloth didn't need to be so plain. Ready? Naruto asked and she nodded. The two of them walked together to his Ichiraku ramen stand, which wasn't too far from their current location. With some more preparation, Naruto opened his ramen stand and waited for people to come. About 3 hours into work, Naruto was crying over his pile of broken bowls and dishes. His ramen stand closed since he had no more ramen to serve. Aphrodite, as beautiful as she was extremely sucked at doing things. In the span of 3 hours, she had broken more than 48 ramen bowls, 37 dishes, 23 glasses, pissed off more than 30 customers by serving the wrong dish or worse, introduced their face and head to the steaming hot ramen. The redhead was standing behind him, fidgeting nervously, her eyes averting here and there, trying to avoid looking at her boss at the moment. Her clothes had been soaked in ramen soup, she even had some noodles on her head, falling on her face. This was her first day and again, she had made an extremely bad impression. Taking wrong orders, tripping and falling, breaking almost every bowl and dish Naruto had in store. Taking a step closer to the blonde, she opened her mouth to talk but closed it since she didn't know if he would forgive her or not. She wanted to take the job to be closer to Naruto, but with her clumsiness, she had made his stand's reputation take a trip to hell. He would hate her, and then, she would be kicked away. Are you okay, Dai-chan? Naruto asked as he stood up, looking at her with concern. Her mind almost shut down from the question that only one word could come out of her mouth. I said, if you were okay. Your cloth and all, Naruto said with a blush on his face as he averted his eyes. Looking at herself, Aphrodite noticed that her black bra was noticeable through the soaked white shirt. The goddess also blushed but shook her head and bowed at Naruto. Sorry, Naruto-kun. She said with a saddened face as she kept her head down. She could hear footsteps as Naruto closed the distance between them. She closed her eyes and prepared for whatever punishment the blonde would put her through. It was her fault after all, and she would take responsibility for her clumsiness. A hand touched her head. Don't worry, Dai-chan, I'm not angry or anything, Naruto said as he smiled at the goddess. How could he stay angry at her when she bowed to him like that? She readily took responsibility for her fault and she apologized for what she had done. He couldn't and wouldn't be angry at her. After all, her clumsiness was so much like his deceased wife. His face saddened at the time Aphrodite looked up, and without her ability activated, she mistook it and stepped back. The goddess of love smiled sadly as she looked to the side, avoiding eye contact with Naruto. "It's my fault, Naruto-kun, don't say anything. I know you are angry, or worse, you have hated me now. Don't worry, I understand," Aphrodite said quietly. She didn't fake any of that. All she said were real. She looked like she was going to cry, and that made Naruto feel like he had just committed the most dangerous crime. "I'm useless, ain't I, Naruto-kun?" Aphrodite clenched her eyes shut, preventing the tears from falling. Aside from being beautiful, she didn't know how to do anything. She hates herself so much right now. If she weren't so useless, the blonde wouldn't hate her. If she wasn't so useless, maybe, she would make the blonde love her already. While Aphrodite was dealing with her emotions, Naruto was having his own trouble to deal with. The woman in front of him was crying, even if she had clenched her eyes shut to keep her tears from falling, he could clearly see that she was crying. He remembered when he said he would give her a spot at his Ichiraku, he could literally feel the happiness radiated from her, and the hug she gave him that moment was great to say the least, even if it almost made him die of suffocating. She was nervous but also excited at finally helping him out, even if all she did was break bowls and dishes. There also were some funny moments when a customer said they were a couple. Of course he declined and said he was a married man, but he had seen the pain in her eyes, even if it was small, and had turned into determination right after that. "No, you aren't," Naruto said as he embraced the goddess in her arms. Aphrodite opened her eyes and tried to struggle out of his embrace, even if she wanted to remain in his arms like this. Despite a ramen soup-soaked shirt, Aphrodite could feel Naruto's hard-toned body brush up against her. His arms wrapped around her slim waist and shoulder. She stayed silent and didn't do anything. She couldn't break free from his embrace, and he didn't want to release her anytime soon either. Aphrodite closed her eyes, basking herself in the warmth that Naruto was radiating. Just like their first meet, she could feel his aura of trust and protectiveness. "You are my friend and my lovely neighbor, I don't stay angry at you or anything. Don't say you are useless, because to me, you have something that others don't," Naruto said quietly, and Aphrodite nuzzled into the crook of his neck, her arms went around his neck. "Really?" she asked quietly, and she could feel the blonde nod. "You have the ability to make one happy and open the heart of others. Your clumsiness is just a way to make that happen," Naruto said, and Aphrodite cried happy tears that someone had said that to her aside from Hestia. The goddess of the heart had told so too when she helped her prepare tea and cookies for their meeting. Let's just say that everything hadn't gone as planned. To hear that from Naruto, her object of affection. "Thanks, Naruto-kun." She wanted to say that she loved him, today's event just made her want to make their relationship advance faster. But after some thoughts, Aphrodite decided to take things slowly. The blonde wasn't ready yet. Olympus, Hera's temple present. Hera was deep in thought. 2 weeks of constant watching had made her more curious about a certain blonde named Uzumaki Naruto. She had watched him fight, she had watched him talk with the goddess of love, she had watched him helping people, and finally, she had watched his happy moment when playing with Beatrice. He was a good father and a good husband too. He was kind towards others and protective of his loved ones. Those were what Hera wanted in the man of her life. Powerful but not power-hungry or arrogant, a faithful husband who treasured his family above all else. Being handsome was a bonus though. Hera wasn't too certain though, so she would visit his little ramen stand sooner or later. It was a beautiful good day, and Naruto decided to open Ichiraku all day to bring his business back on track. It had been a month since Dite Venusa became his employee. Honestly, it was a horrible month to say the least. The beautiful lady was very clumsy when it came to housework and many others. The thing was that she was willing to learn. She was still clumsy but wasn't too much like before anymore. The blonde sighed as he placed his palm under his chin and looked up at the clear blue sky. It really was a nice day, and it couldn't get any better when a beautiful blonde woman walked into his stand. Olympus, Hera's temple minutes earlier. Hera sighed and placed her feather pen on the table. She had just finished her paperwork for today. She leaned back on her throne and closed her eyes, trying to get some much rest. Images of a certain blonde demigod appeared in her mind, causing her eyes to snap open. A slight smile made its way to her face as her blood-red eyes softened. Come to think about it, it has been 2 weeks already, and I haven't had a chance to visit his ramen stand. Hera thought silently before she stood up and walked to the entrance of her temple. I wonder what Aphrodite will do when she sees me. The goddess of marriage mused to herself, and in a flash, she had disappeared. She would see if he was worthy of her attention or not before taking her next move. Naruto's Ichiraku. Welcome, Naruto said to the beautiful blonde woman as she entered his ramen stand. She wore a long-sleeved white shirt with blue jeans. Blonde smooth hair flowed down her back, gracefully framing her face and covered her forehead, her blood-red eyes looking at him in amusement. "What are your orders, lady?" Naruto asked with a smile on his face. The woman smiled back as she called her order. "A miso ramen." With that, Naruto went to do his job, leaving the beautiful blonde at her seat, looking at him all the while. A man like him is bound to meet Aphrodite eventually, handsome and so full of love. I don't know you are here either." A familiar voice snapped the blonde out of her thought as she narrowed her eyes and looked at her right. Standing there was an extremely large man with tan skin and white hair flowing down to his mid-back, while those on top of his head were standing straight. Any lesser mortal would be intimidated just by looking at him. His height was easily around 7, and his muscles upon his body didn't help much either. The man looked like he could easily carry a car while walking around, which wasn't a problem considering who he was. "Mother," the tan man said. A smirk made its way to his face as his slit violet eyes looked at the beautiful blonde woman in amusement. Hephaestus, the smirk on his face widened as the man now identified as Hephaestus took a seat next to the beautiful blonde, who was no doubt Hera by the way he addressed her. Naruto came and delivered Hera her bowl of ramen and asked for the god of blacksmith's order. "Miso ramen." With that, Naruto went off again and the two immortals sat there in silence. The smirk on Hephaestus's face never ceased as he looked at his mother who was eating the ramen elegantly. "Decided to go with it, huh, mother?" Hephaestus asked seriously as he ate his bowl. Hearing the question, Hera reluctantly placed down her chopstick and nodded with her eyes closed. Hephaestus, despite their bad relationship in the past, had become her favorite son after he rescued her from the black pit of Tartarus. "And your target is Aphrodite's boyfriend?" The god of blacksmith asked with amusement in his voice. Hera narrowed her eyes at Hephaestus. How could he know about Aphrodite's relationship? What would he do about that? Hera began to worry since everyone in Olympus knew what Hephaestus had done to Ares after he found out about Aphrodite's relationship with the god of war. "How?" Hephaestus smirked at his mother and puffed his muscles chest out proudly. "I'm the god of blacksmith and to an extent, machine. My spy network isn't to be underestimated." Hera nodded and opened her mouth but was cut off by her son, who knew what she was going to say. "Don't worry, I won't harm your little boyfriend." A death glare was sent to him by Hera, but he just shrugged it off like it was nothing. Naruto wasn't her boyfriend, and he wasn't a boy. Man or life partner sounded better to her. Then again, they weren't in a relationship with each other yet. So she would prefer a potential life partner. "In fact, I give you and Dite my full support in this," Hephaestus said, that annoying smirk still on his face. Hera blinked and looked at him questioningly. Hephaestus? Support his wife and his mother cheating? In that situation, even a calm goddess like Hera could only give out one answer. With that, the god of blacksmith burst out laughing, ignoring the death glare Hera was giving him for daring to prank her. Despite his fearsome features, Hephaestus was a lively god with so much talent in trolling and pranking that even Hermes had trouble when being targeted. The laughter died down, and Hephaestus ordered another bowl. He had to admit that the stuff was good and could rival his mother's and Hesja's homemade. The two ate in silence with Hera having an annoyed look on her face. Hephaestus had been finding his chance at trolling her ever since their relationship cooled down, and while it was annoying, it also was heartwarming to the goddess of marriage. Hera wanted a happy family after all. Why? Hera asked, she couldn't understand. Her son always tried to embarrass Aphrodite and Ares when the two were still in a relationship together. Why would he support his wife cheating on him now? Do you still remember when Zeus ordered me to marry Aphrodite? Hera nodded. Of course she remembered. Aphrodite had been so tearful back then when she tried to convince her into voiding her marriage with Hephaestus. If it wasn't because of Zeus, she would have helped her back then. Hephaestus had also come and talked with her about the same problem, but to no avail. She widened her eyes as she thought about it. Right. I don't love Aphrodite, she is beautiful and extremely adorable, but she isn't my type of woman. And Aphrodite had said she didn't have any feelings for me either. We are just husband and wife on paper, not once did we sleep together. We are just friends at most. Hephaestus said honestly as he ordered another bowl, adding to his already pretty tall pile. I hate Ares and don't want Dite to settle down with him. That's why there are a lot of traps around the world just for them. This time, I fully support her because I know this boy, Uzumaki Naruto, could make her happy. Hera nodded at that. She could feel his love now, and true to Aphrodite's story, his love was the most beautiful thing ever. Hera smiled softly at that but sighed a moment later. Because of Hephaestus, she hadn't had the chance to talk to Naruto to get to know him better. But there was still time, she would continue to observe her target before she deemed he was worthy of being her partner for the rest of eternity. Mother, I know you want a happy family too, and Uzumaki Naruto can give it to you. I don't plan to stop you from seducing him. A death glare was sent to him courtesy of Hera. She knew that was true, but seduce sounded like she was stealing him from someone. Conquer his heart or fight for his affection sounded better. Just be aware of father. He won't take it lightly if he finds out you are cheating on him. Hera frowned as she placed her chopstick down after he had finished 4 bowls and stood up. Bei-chan, that bastard doesn't deserve me as his wife, never has and never will. He cheats on me countless times, he doesn't have the right to say that. With that, Hera walked up to Naruto and asked him for the recipe of his delicious ramen. She couldn't make delicious food without knowing the recipe. That's why only she and Hestia could cook so well. If Aphrodite tried to make food with her magic without knowing the recipe and how to cook it, it would just blow off on her face. I wish you good luck then. When it came to love, Aphrodite would be pretty scary. Me too, son. Hera waved goodbye to Naruto and walked away to find a safe spot before teleporting away, leaving no trace behind. At Ichiraku, Hephaestus sat silently on his chair before he felt a familiar celestial power behind him and stood up. Aphrodite had just returned from the supermarket. Naruto had tasked her with a mission to buy groceries, and she had completed it. Skipping to Ichiraku with a smile on her face, Aphrodite quickly froze when she felt his celestial power. Her eyes turned dull and the smile on her face disappeared. She walked slowly to the huge man, her mind racing, trying to find a reason for Hephaestus to be here. Based on her experiences, the god of blacksmith had always tried to ruin her dates with Ares. Could it be that he wanted to kill Naruto too? Turning around, Hephaestus was greeted by narrowed eyes Aphrodite. The goddess of love was standing there, with her arms crossed looking at him with cautious eyes. He smirked. Look like you find yourself a good boyfriend, Aphrodite. Uzumaki Naruto, huh? Her eyes turned cold as her boyfriend's name was mentioned. Her relationship with him wasn't official yet, and the blonde hadn't said anything either, but she knew that he was having thought about her lately. As if fate was playing with her life, Hephaestus, her husband, came, and she didn't have a clue about what he was going to do now. Cool down, Aphrodite. I'm not going to do anything. In fact, I'll give you my full support this time. Just like Hera earlier, Aphrodite blinked and could only utter a single word. Huh? This time, Hephaestus' sweat dropped. Why did he keep receiving that reaction? The god of blacksmith sighed. Maybe he should stop trolling people. But life would be too boring if there was no troll. As I said, I totally agree with your relationship with Uzumaki Naruto and give you my full support. He said and retold his reasons to Aphrodite with that annoying smirk on his face again. Aphrodite's eyes lit up and she bowed at Hephaestus, who raised an eyebrow at her sudden action. Normally, Aphrodite would hug people when she wanted to thank someone. He was not an exception. A light bulb suddenly appeared on his head as he looked behind him to see the blonde demigod serving his customers with a smile on his face. Uzumaki Naruto had somehow changed Aphrodite into a proper woman who no longer made unnecessary close contact with others. The goddess of love was willing to change for her love. His mother would be facing a hard opponent now. He shrugged off Aphrodite's thanks and wished her good luck one last time before walking away to find a safe location to teleport back to Olympus. He had a job to do. Who is he, Dite? Your acquaintance? Naruto asked from afar, and Aphrodite turned to him, smiling radiantly. She shook her head and ran up to him with a grocery bag. Hey, just an old friend of mine, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled, and the two continued the business. Later that day, Naruto's house. Beatrice. I'm home, Naruto called out as he stepped into his house with Dite Venusa following closely behind him. Despite having her own house just a few steps from his, the beautiful redhead always stayed at his home except night, but that was because he kicked her out before she could beg him to let her stay and sleep on his bed with him. Welcome home, Tu-chan, Dite-chan. Beatrice's relationship with Aphrodite had advanced pretty fast, ever since the goddess of love gave the little girl some of the sweets she received from a relative in French. She ran to the little girl and hugged her with as much passion as possible. Laughter could be heard from even far away as the two played with each other. Standing at the entrance to his house, looking at the scene before him, Naruto couldn't suppress a smile from gracing his face. A burning, strange sensation in his heart as he watched the two play with each other. He wanted to protect them, he wanted to do everything he could for them, and he wanted the three of them to stay this way forever. He didn't know if it was too late or too early, but there was one thing Naruto had just realized. This family needed a woman named Dite Venusa, and he needed her as well. The cheerful, beautiful lady with a love for sweets had become an indispensable part of his little family and his life. At that moment, Uzumaki Naruto had silently made a vow to himself. Even if gods and demons were standing in his way, he wouldn't back down from protecting her, ever. That's a promise. And an Uzumaki never breaks a promise. Sitting on his throne with nothing to do, the god of war looked at his table to see a picture of him and Aphrodite. Come to think about it, it had been a while since his last encounter with the goddess of love. He couldn't find her, and when he asked someone who might know her current location, namely Athena, Hestia, Hephaestus and Apollo, they shooed him away. Athena said she had nothing to tell him, but he knew that the goddess of wisdom just didn't want to tell him if her narrowed eyes and flaring power when talking to him were any indications. The talk he had with Hestia was more peaceful. The goddess of family just refused to say anything to him and shooed him away while sipping tea. Hephaestus, his bane of existence, laughed into his face for letting Aphrodite find out his true self and introduced his face to one of the many hammers in his workshop without telling a thing. About Apollo, the god of sun really irritated him to no end with his answer. He knew Aphrodite's location and he also knew what she was trying to accomplish, but he refused to say anything to him either. That day, when he tried to threaten Apollo, he had, once again, been surprised. Olympus, Apollo's temple a few days prior. Apollo was sitting on his throne, reading an orange book while chuckling uncontrollably. The god of sun, prophecy and poems, son of Zeus, twin brother of Artemis and self-proclaimed best archer in the world. He was a pale-skinned man with long brown hair tied into a big braid down to his lower back and golden eyes. He wore brown long pants with no decorating and a sleeveless unbuttoned brown old-style shirt. Since his temple was extremely hot, his clothing style made it more bearable while working. The god of sun turned his gaze from his book to the entrance of his temple to see none other than Ares. The god of war walked into his temple with a smug smile on his face like he owned the temple himself. Apollo narrowed his eyes for a moment but then smiled lazily at the red-head god. It would do him no good irritating his so-called half-brother. "Yeah, Ares kun, what brought you to my temple?" Apollo asked lazily as he pocketed his book, placing one hand under his chin to support his head, and looked at Ares. The god of war stopped midway and looked at him with a frown on his face. "You know my reason, Apollo," Ares said with a smirk on his face. The god of sun looked at him questioningly for a moment, then, miraculously, a light bulb appeared on his head as he looked like he had just remembered something. He gave Ares a goofy grin. "About your porn book you requested from me a year ago, huh?" A tick mark appeared on Ares' head as he looked at his half-brother with a twitching eyebrow. How the heck can he remember something that long, but forget something just happened recently was unknown to him. "I asked you about Ite's location 3 days ago, brother," Ares said, barely restraining his anger at the god of sun. He didn't want to make bad blood with Apollo, the god of sun knew what he wanted to know, and until he knew Aphrodite's current location, he would be a good guy. As good as he could. Several question marks appeared on Apollo's head as he tried to remember the talk he had with the god of war. Finally, they merged into one big one mark in gold shining brightly as Apollo grinned as Ares again. "I remembered. It's true that you requested me to find her for you." Ares nodded, patiently waiting for his answer. Apollo's eyes turned serious and the grin on his face disappeared, replaced by the face of a seasoned warrior who had seen and survived war. "What if I said I don't know?" Ares looked up at Apollo questioningly before a snarl appeared on his face. "You lie, Aphrodite must have come here and made you keep silent by spreading her legs for you." Ares shouted as his power flared, fire appeared in the air around him, his fists clenched tight, and his eyes looked at Apollo with as much killing intent as possible. The god of sun didn't faze however, and raised his hand in the air. The sky shined brightly as a golden portal appeared above his hand and ran out his golden chariot. The chariot ran at Ares with impressive speed which caused the god of war to jump away and looked at Apollo with gritted teeth. Before he could say anything though, a fireball from small to big flew out of the chariot and attacked him in all directions. Boom. A sounding boom could be heard as all the fireballs hit its target. Apollo looked at the spot where Ares stood a moment later and with a wave of his hand, all the smokes were cleared, revealing an unscratched god of war with some sort of invisible barrier around his body. "Why are you doing this, Apollo? Or was I right? That slut came here and offered her body to you in exchange for silence, right?" Ares asked with that smirk on his face again. Apollo looked lazily at his half-lazy and picked out his orange book. He didn't want to deal with him right now. "Sex with Aphrodite was great, but it's a shame I didn't have the chance to do it with her as much as you can. The one who made her go away was you, Ares. You don't have the right to know where it is at the moment." The fireball went straight through the air, aiming for the orange book Apollo was holding, but was caught in his hand before it could hit its target. The god of sun looked at his brother with an annoyed look on his face, his golden eyes shining brightly as his celestial power increased. Responding to his power, his golden chariot ran straight at Ares again, but the god of war jumped away right in time to avoid the impact. "You're so jealous that you want to keep her for yourself, huh?" Ares said with a smirk, and Apollo smirked back at him. "Nope. I'm not the type of man who forces women into submission or a relationship if they don't like it. Aphrodite doesn't love me, so I won't force her. I respect females after all. Unlike you." Apollo placed his book on his table and stood up, hands in pockets. "Aphrodite is living happily with the man of her life. I can see her happy future with him. I won't let you ruin that future, Ares. Returning to your temple, I want to continue my story," Apollo said calmly. Ares wanted to retort, but before he could do anything, an arrow went straight through the air and cut his cheek, golden blood flowed out of his injury before it healed with a hiss. He looked up only to be greeted by Apollo's ultimate skill. World of Light. World of Light was Apollo's ultimate skill, which granted him the ability to bend all the light in this world to his will. There was no escape for those who were targeted. Apollo was that scary when he took something serious. Ares could feel his armor begin to heat up under so many fake suns. Yes, Apollo had compressed light into a ball of light which began a fake sun and had them aimed at him in all directions. Each ball held enough power to blow off a district, and all of those balls combined together could wipe out an entire country. You are in my territory, Ares. You are no match for me right now. Leave while the chance still lasted, brother Apollo said seriously and stressed the last part. If Aphrodite's target was anyone different, he would have told Ares to avoid trouble, but luckily for her, her target was his favorite author, so he would do her a favor this time. Ares snarled and flashed away without another word. Olympus, Ares' temple. He and Apollo were rivaled in power. The two of them could fight for all, but in the end, no one would win. But back then, Apollo was boosted by being in his territory and had already activated the World of Light. The chance of him even emerging alive after the god of sun threw those balls at him was slim to zero. Talked about winning. But that wasn't a problem for him. The trip had given him some useful information after all. That woman dared to seduce another man, huh? Ares thought, amused by the fact that his bitch dared to do against his word, his rules. I'll teach you a lesson, Dite. And this time, this will be a hard lesson for you. Haha. Ha 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 ha. Ares' laugh could be heard all around his territory, scaring his servants to the core. Eros? Ares called out to his son. If love was involved, Eros would no doubt have no trouble finding them, and then, he would come, kill the man Aphrodite loved and take her home, and punish her for daring to go against him. Aphrodite was his, only his, and it would stay that way forever. No one could change that fact. New York. Naruto's house. Days passed, weeks passed, and eventually, months passed. Aphrodite didn't remember how many times had passed since she came to mortal realms and lived with one Uzumaki Naruto. She was happy that she made that decision. To come down to earth and find her happiness, believing in Hekate's words. Funny thing is that her object of affection was said to be Goddess's son too. It's like everything was prepared before and Hekate knew what was going to happen. Sitting on the chair and looking out the window next to her, Aphrodite sighed. It was 2012, just a few days before the winter solstice began. When it began, she would have to return to Olympus for the meeting. Once half a year, all the Olympians gathered together and discussed the world. Plans would be proposed and solutions would be brought up. The meeting usually lasted for a week, and that meant a week of constant talking about boring things and a week of no Naruto. Aphrodite could easily sleep after finishing her report to pass the day or play with Ares. Of course, she didn't want to do anything with the god of war now, but a week of not seeing Naruto was a big no-no for her. Aphrodite sighed. Even if she hated it, she had to show up at the meeting, if not, big trouble would arrive. Too deep in her thought, Aphrodite never noticed Naruto had been standing behind her for a while now. The blonde had a pleasant smile on his face as he looked at the beautiful Redeed. Time had made him realize that this woman meant a lot to him and to his daughter as well. He still loved his wife, Crovia. She would live in his heart forever, but he needed to look toward the future. Beatrice needed a mother to take care of her, and also, when the girl grew up, she would have Dite to talk about the girl's problems. He needed her too. Beautiful, adorable, funny and always full of energy. He needed her to light up his world, which had been darkened when Crovia passed away. Even if he tried to deny it, Crovia's sudden death had changed his look toward the world, yet Dite Venusa had somehow managed to make him feel at peace again. He needed her here, this family needed her. And so, he decided to take the next step in their strange relationship. Ichiraku wouldn't be open anytime soon due to the cold weather, so they had some days off to do whatever they wanted. Silently, Naruto walked up behind Aphrodite and embraced her, making the goddess of love blush at the sudden bold action of her target. She could feel his hot breath on her ears and his strong arms coiled around her slim waist, holding her firmly. Instinctively, she leaned back, melted into Naruto's embrace and closed her eyes. She knew the blonde knew about her affection for him, and sooner or later, he would do something. It's just that she hadn't expected the blonde to be the one to act first. Let's date, Dite. New York. Aphrodite's house. Needless to say, the goddess was extremely happy to finally have a date with her object of affection, her boyfriend and hopefully soon-to-be husband too. She was nervous but at the same time, happy and confident. She was nervous because it was her first real relationship with someone who actually loved her genuinely, not because of her beauty, happy because her dream was one step closer to becoming real, and confident because she didn't know why she was feeling confident. Aside from that, there was a little bad feeling that told her something would happen and ruin her date with Naruto. Not letting it bother her, Aphrodite snapped her finger and various clothes appeared out of nowhere, all hovering around her, awaiting their orders. The sky outside was cold, so she needed some warm clothes but at the same time, pretty enough to catch Naruto's attention. She would wear a coat too, so instead of a skirt, Aphrodite chose blue jean pants and a plain white t-shirt to better go with it. With her clothes already chosen, Aphrodite snapped her finger again and in a flash she was wearing a new outfit. Her red hair flowed down her back gracefully like it had always done before, her signature autumn leaf was tied just above her right ear, 2 long bangs framing her face, and several strands fell over her forehead. Even if it was winter, she still liked her autumn leaves more because autumn was the season of love and romance, never said she didn't like some blue snowflakes on her red head either. It's just ridiculous. She wore a big brown coat with fur collar and many pockets, a matching scarf and plain blue jeans. Aphrodite also wore shoes instead of high heels. Even she knew which one was better for walking on a snowy day, you know. Opening her wooden door, she saw the familiar face of her boyfriend Uzumaki Naruto. He wore black jeans with white knees and a small chain attached for fashion. Unlike Aphrodite, Naruto had no reason to wear such a big coat, he only wore a long-sleeved black shirt and a white light coat with hood and red decorating. The blonde smiled at the goddess of love and offered her his right arm which Aphrodite happily latched onto and walked with the blonde out the snowy street of New York. To say the couple caught the attention of everyone on the street was an understatement. It's not every day you see a happy couple walking with each other on the street on winter days, hand in hand. Man would leered and whistled at Aphrodite, hoping to catch her attention. Earl would wink and blow kisses at Naruto, but none was brave enough to approach him with a very dangerous reed latched tightly onto his arm, glaring at every girl who dared to seduce her man. The walk despite being short was pleasant. The two entered a normal restaurant and sat at a corner near the window. A waitress came and took their order before going away, leaving the new couple seated opposite each other in a comfortable silence. Outside, snows were falling, and Aphrodite was mesmerized by how beautiful the scenery was. It didn't help that the restaurant was playing You Are My Angel by Loretta Chow. Overall, it made her feel like she was the main heroine in a romance movie, with Naruto being the protagonist. My father had told me a story in the past when a goddess came down to this world and met an unbearable man who always followed after her despite rain or snow. Naruto's voice caught Aphrodite's attention and she turned to him with curious eyes, urging him to continue the story. Actually, the story was somehow like her and Naruto's story, just in reverse positions. She was the one who to follow, no scratch that to stalk him, not the other way around. Naruto smiled at the goddess and continued his story about the past. The story of his father and a goddess named Hecate. Thanks for watching this video. Part 3 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.